A woman runs through a house, screaming and crying for help. She looks behind her and catches a glimpse of a shadowy figure in the next room, and it's coming towards her. She screams again and runs in the only direction she can to get away from it, up the stairs. She runs into the bathroom at the top of the stairs and locks the door behind her. She is breathing heavy as she quickly takes stock of her situation. There's a window, but it's much too small for her to fit through, and even if she could, she'd probably break her neck trying to drop to the ground below. There's no way out. She's trapped. But she has an idea. She takes a deep breath, giving herself a brief moment to gather her courage before she unlocks the door and opens it. She steps onto the landing and spots what she's looking for, a telephone on a small table. But then she also sees the shadow of the thing chasing her coming up the stairs. She runs to the phone and picks it up before running back into the bathroom again. She shuts the door behind her and starts dialing 911, but just as she's about to dial the last number, the phone is ripped out of her hands and slams against the door. She runs to pick it up again, but when she does, she finds that the cord has been cut. There's got to be something else she can try. She rushes to the medicine cabinet and starts searching for anything she can that might help her. She frantically looks for something, anything, but is startled by a loud noise. She turns to see the door bulging on its hinges again and again. Her pursuer is trying to kick it down. She goes back to searching the medicine cabinet. There must be something she can use. The woman closes the medicine cabinet, and for a second, time seems to stop. She stares at herself in the mirror, a look of confusion on her face. She mouths the words, "Help me," to herself in the mirror. The door suddenly bursts off the frame and slams to the floor. The woman spins around holding the only thing she could find, a toothbrush. Her pursuer steps through the now empty doorway. He's a large, terrifying-looking man with wild yet focused eyes, and he's holding the biggest knife she's ever seen. The man approaches, and the woman cowers in fear. He pauses for just a moment, admiring himself in the medicine cabinet mirror and smiling, seemingly very happy with how this entire scene has unfolded. The man then raises the knife above him as the woman holds up the toothbrush as if it will somehow protect her. But it can't, and the man brings down the knife again and again and again. This murder may have occurred over 40 years ago, but its memory is more alive than you might think. Sometimes what happened in the past doesn't stay there and finds a way to repeat itself again and again and again. Though maybe not in the way that you expect. So join me, Dr. Bob, and find out exactly why SCP-987 is known to the SCP Foundation as the Gruesome Gallery. SCP-987 is a collection of 13 different wall-mounted mirrors of varying shapes and sizes, which have been designated as SCP-987-A through M. Over half of the collection consists of medicine cabinets, but the others range in size from small makeup mirrors to full-length mirrors, with the largest measuring 1 by 1.5 meters. The aesthetic style and materials used indicate that all the mirrors were produced between the 1940s and the 1990s, and there's nothing about their construction or immediate appearance that would give the impression that they are anomalous at all. Photos and video of the mirrors also show them to be perfectly normal mirrors, with the surfaces reflecting exactly as you would expect. In all, it appears at first glance that these are completely normal mirrors, though more in-depth research into the mirrors has been made difficult. You'll see why later. SCP-987 mirrors will finally reveal their strange and unnerving characteristics when a person stands directly in front of them and looks at their surface. When they do, they won't see their reflection as they expected, but an image of a completely different place. It was theorized by researchers that these locations being shown were the mirror's previous location, and research into the origins of the mirrors have revealed the original locations of mirrors C, K, and M, which confirmed this theory to be true. But the mirrors don't just show a static location. When someone looks directly into the mirror, they will see an entire scene play out, one that always depicts someone's extremely violent and/or gruesome death. Each mirror depicts a different scene and location, though most of them appear to take place in a bathroom of some kind. The scenes shown vary in length, with the shortest being just 48 seconds and the longest running for over 4 minutes. After the scene finishes, it will simply start again, like a video that has been set on repeat. But the strange qualities of SCP-987 don't stop there. After the video loops and repeats itself twice, the images will start to change. The person in the mirror who is about to suffer a horrific death will seem to become aware that someone is watching them through the mirror. They will often begin soundlessly pleading with the viewer to help them, growing more emphatic as the scene evolves. If there is an aggressor present in the scene, they too will sometimes seem to become aware that they are being watched through the mirror, and may even appear to interact with the person who is watching them by making hostile gestures or writing on the surface of the mirror. 3 of the victims portrayed on the glass of SCP-987 mirrors have been identified: the previously mentioned SCP-987-C, K, and M mirrors. SCP-987-C depicts a well-to-do 62-year-old male in the bathroom of his California home in 1968. The man is bound and kneeling on the floor when a young Asian woman dressed in lingerie enters the room and proceeds to strangle the man to death. The scene will repeat one time and then begin to change. In this instance, the woman will usually stop at the mirror after she enters the room to reapply her lipstick. She will then kiss the mirror, leaving a red imprint on the glass before asphyxiating the man on the floor. When looking into SCP-987-K, the viewer will see a 34-year-old man in the hallway of his home, which has been identified as being in Maine during the early 2000s. The man is standing on a ladder while he installs a new chandelier in the ceiling. After a moment, the man loses his balance and becomes entangled in the elaborate lighting fixture. As he struggles to compose himself, he accidentally pulls a length of electrical wire from the ceiling that becomes wrapped around the man's neck as he falls from the ladder, leading to him being simultaneously strangled and electrocuted. When the scene repeats and starts to change, the man will appear to become more and more apprehensive about his task, and his final moments will become more and more painful looking. His wife will sometimes enter as well, to find his dead body suspended from the ceiling, before the scene ends and starts to repeat. SCP-987-M shows a 20-year-old woman in the bathroom of a hotel room in New York City in 1978. The woman is seen to be reacting to an aggressor who is outside the view offered by the mirror. The woman looks afraid and will try to run out of the room, but a man in a denim jacket rushes the woman, stabs her in the abdomen with a knife, and flees. The woman falls to the ground and dies almost instantly. When it repeats for the 3rd time, the woman will attempt to communicate with the viewer prior to the aggressor entering the scene, but she will appear inebriated and will struggle to communicate clearly. If SCP-987 was simply a collection of mirrors that displayed the final moments of individuals and changed on repeat viewings in odd and frightening ways, that would be strange enough. But there's even more to this bizarre SCP. In addition to the mirrors, is SCP-987-1, commonly referred to within the Foundation as the Curator. SCP-987-1 is an invisible entity, visible only to heat-sensitive cameras, that takes up roughly the space of a 2-meter-tall person. The area it occupies is endothermic, meaning it drains the heat from nearby objects, in this instance, from ones that are roughly 1 to 2 meters away. It has also demonstrated the ability to manipulate objects up to 8 meters away that weigh as much as 150 kilograms. SCP-987-1's primary behavior is to move along the ground, going from mirror to mirror in an apparently random pattern. It stops in front of each mirror for roughly 30 minutes before moving on to the next. It only engages in this behavior when alone, though, and if anyone is present, it will maintain at least a 3-meter distance from them at all times. The only exceptions to this occurred when staff attempted to do anything to the mirrors other than gently clean them. If the mirrors are tampered with in any way, SCP-987-1 will react quickly and aggressively, making any physical research into the mirrors difficult, if not impossible. Both SCP-987-1, as well as the collection of all 13 mirrors, have been classified as Euclid, and are currently contained at Research Site 14 in an airtight 5 by 12 by 3 meter chamber with concrete walls, that is itself enclosed in a Faraday cage. The chamber is monitored at all times by both standard and thermographic cameras, but despite this, there have been several instances of SCP-987-1 seeming to breach containment and disappear for short periods of time before reappearing in the containment cell. On at least 5 known occasions, SCP-987-1 dissipated from both the normal and thermal imaging cameras. In each of these instances, when it reappeared, a new mirror materialized as well, which has led to the Foundation's original collection of 13 mirrors growing to 18 in total, and it seems likely that this number may continue to increase. While in most cases, SCP-987-1 returns with a mirror that depicts a death that occurred long in the past, in one especially chilling instance, the 987-1 entity disappeared a full 15 minutes before the death took place. When it returned, It had the mirror depicting the freak accident death of a man being killed by his own chandelier. Whether SCP-9871 had any hand in this death, or perhaps even all of the deaths, is currently unknown. What does seem likely is that the presence of the mirrors in Foundation control is the only thing that keeps SCP-9871 in containment, at least most of the time. But be careful the next time you're performing a dangerous task and notice that a mirror is in view. You never know who or what may be watching. Now go and watch another entry from the files of DrBob, and be sure to subscribe as we delve further and further into the SCP Foundation's classified archives. It's day 9 of Joseph Mann's expedition into the extreme wilderness of Antarctica. He's been following the tracks of a mysterious creature, a massive, anomalous beast that has been spotted in the snowy wastes. As he follows the tracks, he sees something. It's his own tent, but he had been walking for days after leaving this camp. How was he back here after only a few hours? Time and distance were starting to feel off, like they were stretched out and folded over into knots. Maybe he was confused about the tracks. Maybe he hadn't been chasing after something, but following the tracks of something that had been chasing him. Maybe he was wrong about everything. Hi, I'm DrBob, and this is SCP-2764, also known as the Eldritch Antarctic. SCP-2764 is a massive biological entity, standing over 380 meters tall and estimated to weigh over 150,000 metric tons. It possesses around 80 tentacle-like arms that it uses for movement and simple actions like grasping objects. It also has what looks to be a head with 4 eyes. SCP-2764 possesses a number of anomalous properties, including the ability to communicate telepathically with humans, though the language used changes based on the person who is receiving its messages. Strangely, this communication appears to go one way only, as it has never demonstrated that it understands any attempts to communicate back to it. Its physical state has also been observed to be quite anomalous. Its size does not follow normal Euclidean geometry, with the creature appearing many times larger or smaller than it should, based on the viewer's distance from SCP-2764. There appears to be a critical zone lying roughly 50 kilometers away from the creature that stretches around it in a circle. As you move away from the creature and approach this line, SCP-2764 actually appears to grow larger until the critical zone is passed, at which point it begins to shrink as you move farther and farther away. Its body has a number of other strange properties too. Its tentacle-like arms rapidly translocate around its body at random intervals, jumping around all over its body, creating a twitchy, writhing mass that makes it impossible to count how many tentacles it actually possesses. But perhaps strangest of all is that not only do the creature's arms seem to break the laws of physics by jumping around its body, but so too does the entirety of SCP-2764. It's been observed to spontaneously relocate itself to different places, as if it is flickering in and out of existence. It appears that the creature flickers into a new place like this at random intervals, but it may be following some yet unknown rules, as it has never been seen appearing more than 25 kilometers away from where it was last seen, and always flickers back to its original location within 48 hours. SCP-2764 was first discovered by a civilian team that was conducting detailed surveys of the Antarctic landscape. The team observed the creature and were immediately alarmed by its strange properties, especially its bizarre geometric qualities. They returned to their home base and described what they had seen to a colleague, who was actually an SCP Foundation researcher in charge of investigating anomalous activity in Antarctica. This researcher sent word back to his superiors, who activated Mobile Task Force Eta-5, also known as the Jaeger Bombers. Eta-5 administered amnestics to the survey team and any other exposed civilians before setting up a perimeter around SCP-2764. What they would eventually learn was that the perimeter they established was far too close. In his investigation logs, MTF Eta-5 Commander Joseph Mann noted that he immediately experienced strange anomalous effects, such as how the creature seemed to shrink the closer he got to it, and the strange voices in his head. His curiosity soon got the better of him, and he decided to do some of his own research into the entity before the rest of the SCP Foundation scientists and guards arrived to take over the investigation. Mann gathered a couple volunteers who were also curious about the nature of the anomaly and set out on an expedition to gather more information. Just as they had experienced before,
The more they walked towards the creature, the more it appeared to shrink in size. They also made note of strange prints in the snow. At first, they looked to be human prints, but then seemed to change into something that looked as if a squid had pulled itself onto the land and was dragging itself through the snow. After several days, the whole team was hearing voices. They also realized they had left their tissue analyzer back at a previous camp and would have to backtrack to retrieve it. As they moved away from the creature, they expected it to now increase in size, but it didn't. It stayed the same. Either something had changed about the anomaly, or SCP-2764 was moving towards them. After recovering the tissue analyzer, they continued on towards the creature again. Commander Mann began to understand the voices he was hearing and could even make out certain words like snow and back. Their perception of time was affected too. Hours seemed to stretch out or pass by in the blink of an eye. The voice he was hearing started to become more direct, and the message was clear: turn back. Mann was compelled to press on, though, even with the extremes of the Antarctic cold beginning to weigh on him. But then, SCP-2764 suddenly vanished, flickering out of existence, and the team was left with no choice but to follow the strange tentacle-like tracks in the snow, hoping they would lead to the creature. The tracks led them back to their old tent, the same one they had left the tissue analyzer at before, which should have been impossible based on the time and distance they had walked. Just then, Commander Mann realized that he had been wrong. They were the ones who had been pursued. They hadn't been following the tracks forward, but backwards to where they had been. Even worse, he realized that his team had disappeared. He was completely alone. Commander Mann continued to trudge through the snow, walking without direction, when he spotted SCP-2764 again. It was circling him, trying to maintain its distance, but he raced towards the creature and sliced off a piece of its flesh for analysis. Something strange happened when he placed it in the analyzer, though. The machine displayed a 0, which was the reading for human tissue. This strange result required further analysis from the Foundation researchers who should now have arrived to take over the investigation, so Mann began to make his way back in the direction of home. He spotted what looked to be members of his team off in the distance, and assumed that they must be on a mission to rescue him. Try as he might, though, the spatial anomalies prevented him from ever getting closer. It felt like it would take him an entire day just to walk a few feet. He assumed it must be the same for his rescuers as he watched them off in the distance, seeming to never get closer. At one point, he could even see as they stopped and turned back, appearing to return to an old campsite. He couldn't understand what they were doing, but then they disappeared entirely, only to reappear much closer to him. Commander Mann, now assured that there was something terribly wrong happening, tried to approach the now single rescuer he could see to tell him to turn back, but before he could, the man rushed at him with a knife and cut a piece of his flesh from his back. It's at that point that Commander Mann finally started to understand. He hadn't been watching a rescue team come for him. He'd been watching himself. He had been walking towards the creature, and yet, at the same time, he had also always been the creature. Commander Mann was trapped in a time loop where he was doomed to transform into the monstrous SCP-2764 and then watch himself meet the same fate over and over again, forever. The voices he had been hearing telling him to turn back were his own, words of warning that he was doomed to always ignore. SCP-2764 has been classified as Keter and is currently located in a classified area of Antarctica. A 150-kilometer radius has been established around the object, which is to be monitored at all times by Mobile Task Force Eta-5. Any civilians that come within the 150-kilometer radius, either by accident or due to SCP-2764 flickering to a populated area, are to be administered Class A amnestics, and any civilians that may have knowledge of the event are to be administered Class B amnestics. Should any civilian or Foundation employees come within 30 kilometers of SCP-2764, they are to be detained and immediately questioned. Following their psychological examination, and depending on the results of the evaluation, they will either be administered Class A amnestics or terminated. Now go and watch another entry from the files of DrBob, and be sure to subscribe as we delve further and further into the SCP Foundation's classified archives. A symphony of police sirens cut through the silence of the cold night, accompanied by the barking of K-9 units and bursts of gunfire. All this noise is for just one man, a man on the run. He runs through the trees, clutching a handgun with a sweaty, shaking hand, gritting his bloody teeth. He wheezes, exhausted from the chase. His hair is messy and matted with dirt and grease, his stolen clothes stained with mud. A rivulet of blood runs down his forehead from a deep gash just below his hairline, the place where his head collided with the steering wheel. He'd planned the breakout so well. How did it all fall apart? Someone must have ratted him out. That's the only thing that could have happened. No honor among thieves is more than just a phrase, it's a fact. Searchlights pierce the darkness. Shouts of, "He went that way!" and "Get him!" abound, as do more barks of angry dogs. He grumbles under his breath and hides behind a tree, trying to collect his hurricane of thoughts. There's no doubt about it. The convict is a bad man. He's taken plenty of lives, and he doesn't regret any of them, not one bit. The only thing he regrets is that he was caught. 3 hours ago, he was crawling out of a secret tunnel and escaping from Angola, a place known on paper as the Louisiana State Penitentiary, but better known as the Farm, the Angola Plantation, or most evocatively of all, as the Alcatraz of the South. A maximum security prison, complete with a death row and a reputation every bit as fearsome as its inmates. And the convict had certainly earned his place there. A long resume written in blood had gotten him locked up and sentenced to death after a speedy trial. Things had already gotten violent. During escapes like this, the first hours are the most crucial. A contact on the outside had left him a handgun, ready to be collected from a hidden spot inside of a tree near the roadside. That gun also functioned as his vehicle, or at least his ticket to getting one. He'd flagged down the first car naive enough to stop for him, and shoved the gun into the driver's face and demanded he exit the vehicle and hand over both the car keys and his wallet. He'd driven for almost 2 hours when the heat finally started to rise. The convict had just passed through the borders of St. Landry Parish, Louisiana, when the classic rock station he was enjoying on his victim's radio was interrupted by a sudden report on his own escape. They knew he'd gotten out. They knew he was armed. They even knew the type of car he was driving. It wouldn't be long before the telltale blue and red flashing lights of a police cruiser would appear in his rearview mirror. One car chase and a spike strip later, and that same car is halfway through the wall of a gas station. The convict is scrambling out of the dented door, firing off a couple haphazard shots in the vague direction of his pursuers, and fleeing into the darkness of a nearby swamp. And that's where he is right now, feeling the noose tighten around his neck as he prepares for his final standoff. It's not like he has any choice in the matter. He'd rather go down in a hail of bullets in a swamp than go back inside. They're so close he can hear their heavy-booted footsteps now, and the ragged breaths of the dogs tugging at their leashes. His heart pounds in his chest. All he can do is go deeper, deeper, deeper. The convict flees into the dark of the swamp, reluctantly breathing in the fetid stink of the old mud and rotten vegetation. The dark swamp is his friend, though, since the glow of police flashlights behind him means almost certain death. He struggles through undergrowth, clambering over roots and fallen trees, feeling the squelch of his stolen shoes sinking into the thick, wet mud. The last thing he expects to hear in this godforsaken place is a whisper from the dark. And not just any whisper. It's the voice of a little girl. Just hearing it almost makes his heart stop. He freezes in place and turns to see her emerging from the dark. She can't be any older than 10 or 11, this little girl with a tangle of messy hair and these frantic, feral eyes. It's hard to tell what she really looks like, because almost every inch of her is covered in a thick coating of mud, as though she's just sprung out of the earth. On any other occasion, his instinct might be to run, or even something more drastic, but instead, he doesn't move. He stands there as she speaks, listening, even as the police get closer. The little girl tells him that she knows the perfect place for him to hide, somewhere that the police won't catch him. They'll have no idea where to look. All he needs to do is trust her and follow her deeper into the swamp. If he does as she says, he can finally be free. He nods and follows her. What else can he do, really? The girl reaches out with a muddy hand, and the convict takes it as she leads him into the all-consuming dark of the swamp. The searching police officers suddenly hear a short but blood-curdling shriek come from the depths of the swamp. 40 men and multiple canine units scramble, trying to find the place where they heard the man cry out, but they can't find a single trace of him. They set up a perimeter around the swamp, trying to guard every possible exit, placing checkpoints on every road he might be traveling. And when daylight finally dawns, they search again and again and again, but they're unable to find him. For all intents and purposes, the man is a ghost now, at least for a few months. The authorities don't give up, though. After all, a dangerous convict could still be out there somewhere, just waiting. He's armed, deadly, and clearly intelligent enough to avoid police capture. Chances are he's halfway across the state by now, if he's even still in Louisiana, or even the United States at all for that matter. So it comes as a surprise to everyone when he's finally found, sitting at a bus stop in a small city in Louisiana. The man isn't moving. He's just staring off vacantly into space, a translucent rope of drool hanging from his bottom lip. There's something very wrong with the convict. That much is clear even from a glance. His face seems a little longer, as though the shape of his skull has changed. He has heterochromia now, with his left eye changed to a completely different color from before. And when his shirt is finally removed, a crisscross of extensive surgical scarring is mapped out along his back. Far from the sharp, lethal criminal portrayed by the media in the aftermath of his escape, this man is borderline catatonic. He talks in short, simple sentences like a very young child, and his attention seems to drift easily when being spoken to. This same man who had mounted such a daring escape from prison and then managed to evade all his pursuers does nothing to resist the men who come to arrest him at the bus stop. He's returned to the prison and held in the medical bay for evaluation. However, a mere 10 hours after first being admitted, and after giving little to no useful information during questioning, his health begins to take a sharp decline. He complains about his insides burning and asks for something cold to drink. When he's given water, he spits it back out soon after and begins to sob. He says he wants his mother, though he can't recall her name. There's very little he can recall about anything. The next morning, he breaks into a series of severe seizures before passing away. His autopsy shows significant brain damage, as well as the failure of several of his major organs. The coroner, though, found it impossible to explain how any of this had occurred. A month later, a pair of hikers making their way across the same swampland where the police chase ended would call in to the local authorities, terrified, claiming they found a dead body near a sinkhole. When officers are dispatched to look into it, they can't believe their eyes. Despite being significantly damaged, the body is clearly recognizable. After all, his face had been on every newspaper and TV screen in Louisiana for quite some time now. It's the convict, wearing the same clothes he'd escaped in. The same clothes that had been taken off of him and burned when he'd been recaptured at the bus stop. None of this made any sense. The convict's body was exhumed from the prison cemetery and given a DNA test. They found, with some surprise, that the body did not genetically match the DNA they had on file for him, the DNA which had, incidentally, convicted him in the first place. When the body retrieved from the swampland had its DNA tested, they also found something strange. The DNA was so damaged that it was impossible to make any conclusive determinations as to whether it was a match. It was the strangest mystery anyone involved had ever seen, and sadly for them, they would never know the answer as to what happened to the convict in that swamp. The answer, of course, is SCP-1692, which is an anomaly consisting of 3 parts that is confined to a few kilometers of swampland in St. Landry Parish, Louisiana. Something you learn after studying many of the anomalies in the files of the SCP Foundation is that the question, why, is often a dead end. The best you can expect is half an answer to how, with the only definitive answers available being something more in the neighborhood of, how can we stop it? Is SCP-1692 just such a case? Let's start with SCP-1692-2, which is the heart of the anomaly. SCP-1692-2 is a sinkhole of unknown depth, filled with mud and water. While you are right to assume that these are quite commonly found in Louisiana swamps, since 2014, this particular sinkhole is different in that it has played host to at least 31 sets of human remains, as well as 24 different sets that turned out to have belonged to animals. Despite constant monitoring by the Foundation to ensure that nothing else has entered the pit since it was brought under containment, new bodies will still sporadically be discovered in the muck, with their exact origin remaining unknown. But the bodies themselves are often quite easily identified. In fact, 14 of the human remains recovered have been confirmed as belonging to people who were reported as having gone missing between the early 1900s and the mid to late 1950s. But before we get too much further into that, let's return to the how of this anomaly's operations. When a human being enters the area near the sinkhole, it becomes increasingly likely that an anomalous entity will manifest, which the Foundation has designated as SCP-1692-1. While SCP-1692-1 will most likely take the form of a young girl, appearing to be perhaps 12 or 13 years old, it has also been seen taking the form of different local mammals, or even the form of one of the people reported missing, whose last known location was known to be in the area near the sinkhole. Regardless of the form it takes, though, once SCP-1692-1 appears, it will act as a kind of lure, beckoning the lost individual further and further into the anomalous zone. It is unknown how they are able to convince the victim to follow them deeper into the swamp, and it is suspected by Foundation researchers that there may be some mimetic influence at play. Though it is also just as probable that SCP-1692-1 is simply capable of utilizing strong, non-anomalous psychological persuasion to entice them. Once the person being led into the swamp crosses beyond a certain point, they will completely disappear, leaving no trace whatsoever. Any clothing or other objects they dropped or left behind will dematerialize, and even their footprints will vanish. In the hours, days, or even sometimes weeks that follow, the third component of the anomaly finally activates. Known as SCP-1692-3, this new entity will manifest in the area and attempt to leave, if leaving is even possible based on their modified physiology. That's because while SCP-1692-3 is a copy of the latest individual to go missing, crucially, it is always an imperfect copy. It will appear altered, deformed, or mutilated in some fashion, and certain elements seem to be recurring. For example, SCP-1692-3 will often now be missing some or even all of their limbs or organs, but there will be no sign of an amputation having been performed. They will also often be observed to be suffering from hydrocephalus, the dangerous condition where fluid builds up in cavities within the brain. 84% of all recorded SCP-1692-3 instances have displayed other major physiological differences from their original counterparts, such as having different hair, skin, or eye colors, or different blood types. And the changes present in these entities are not limited to just physical ones. Dissociative amnesia is always a foregone conclusion for SCP-1692-3 specimens, which means they have no knowledge of their recent history, and they will often also experience depersonalization, reporting the feeling of being in a dreamlike or unreal state of being. They will also possess knowledge that the original had no way of knowing, such as being able to speak in foreign languages the original had no previous fluency in, and there will often be improvements or impairments of the general mental faculties of the original. To put it in layman's terms, the SCP-1692-3 specimens come back wrong. And save for two notable exceptions, which we'll get to in just a moment, the severity of the alterations often cause these specimens to die shortly after they leave the St. Landry Parish anomalous zone. The Foundation's knowledge of SCP-1692 began all the way back in 1938, after they were alerted to a string of child disappearances in the St. Landry Parish area. Thankfully for the local parents, all of these children eventually returned home. However, they all came back different. Some were missing fingers, while one somehow had an extra finger. Others returned with different hair and eye colors. A number of local police officers were sent to search the local swampland in search of a perpetrator. And some of these officers also went missing and returned in a state of profound alteration. Foundation field agents soon arrived and took over the investigation, cordoning off the area around the swamp to hopefully prevent anything else entering or exiting the presumably anomalous area. They conducted their own independent search into the St. Landry Parish swamp, and it didn't take long for them to discover a mutilated corpse in an extremely unnerving condition. The body appeared to belong to a small child, but it was difficult to identify, since most of the head above the jaw was missing. Both legs were also gone, though strangely, it appeared as though skin had grown over the wounds, leaving no sign of a removal, either pre- or post-mortem. A search into the local police files revealed that both the body and clothes perfectly matched those described in a missing persons report for one Bobby Dunbar, a child who had gone missing 25 years prior. But there was something strange about this file. The case had been closed, since Bobby had actually returned to his parents shortly after he disappeared. This meant that, by all rights, this corpse had no reason to exist. How could Bobby Dunbar both be alive and a corpse in a swamp? The Foundation needed to find out, so they placed the body into cold storage and continued the investigation, seeking out the now-adult Bobby Dunbar for questioning. Naturally, this was a frightening ordeal for Mr. Dunbar. He had already lived through the traumatic experience of going missing as a child and then returning home with no memory of the event. Left to constantly wonder about just what had happened to him out in that swamp as he tried his best to move on with his life. But now, here he was, being approached by strange men in dark suits who were telling him that a corpse had been discovered in that same swamp where he had gone missing, and that it appeared to belong to him. Bobby Dunbar, of course, had very little to offer on the possible nature of the body, other than vaguely recalling, quote, the other boy on the wagon. Unfortunately, he was unable to provide any further details on the matter other than this cryptic phrase. The Foundation peered further into the rabbit hole of the Dunbar case and soon learned that after Bobby had returned home, there had been a rather strange custody battle. Investigations into the local court archive revealed that the case had been between the Dunbar family and another local man named William Cantwell Walters. Walters claimed that the boy believed to be Bobby Dunbar wasn't Bobby Dunbar at all, but was in fact actually a different boy named Charles B. Anderson, the son of a woman who worked for Walters. Walters pursued every legal avenue available to him, but after the boy himself identified Mrs. Dunbar as his mother, the court ruled that he really was Bobby Dunbar and granted full custody to the Dunbar family. This put an end to the whole matter, at least in the legal sense, and the boy lived out the rest of life as Bobby Dunbar, eventually passing away in 1966. But that wasn't the end of Bobby's story. Decades later, in 2004, the SCP Foundation took another look at the strange case of Bobby Dunbar. Equipped now with the technology to perform accurate DNA tests, the Foundation discovered that the man who lived his life as Bobby Dunbar actually bore no relation to the Dunbar family at all. But if this wasn't Bobby Dunbar, then who was it? And was that his body that had been discovered in the swamp all the way back in 1938? Unfortunately, the DNA from the corpse in Foundation custody had been severely mutated by a process known as hydrolytic deanimation, and results were inconclusive. Which means that the actual fate of both the real Bobby and the child known as Charles B. Anderson remains unknown. By 1939, enough incidents like the Bobby Dunbar case had transpired that the Foundation saw fit to fully quarantine the area. But they still continued to find new instances of SCP-1693-3 within the swamp. Among those collected by the Foundation was a woman missing her left eye and exhibiting extensive stitching across the left side of her jawline. She was able to provide the Foundation with reliable testimony that revealed the existence of both SCP-1692-1 and SCP-1692-2. And upon the Foundation locating the sinkhole, they discovered 2 more corpses, one of which bore a strong resemblance to the woman. Interestingly, it had several portions missing from its head, including its left eye socket. As could be expected, this distressed the woman considerably, and she vehemently denied any connection between herself and the corpse that was found within the sinkhole in the swamp. The woman was kept in Foundation custody in order to observe her until she inevitably expired, but unlike the other SCP-1692-3 instances, her health didn't appear to falter. When the Foundation was confident that they had gained all they could from studying her, they provided amnestics and released her into the world with an adequate cover story. Much like the man who called himself Bobby Dunbar, she too would go on to live a normal life without further incident. But in another turn that was eerily similar to the Bobby Dunbar story, posthumous DNA tests showed that she too did not genetically match any of her family, and tests on the corpse taken from the swamp which resembled her were also inconclusive. The Foundation has fully fenced off the 2.77 square kilometer area inhabited by SCP-1692 with chain link and barbed wire. Outposts observing the area are positioned at 500-meter intervals, with Foundation guards posing as park employees frequently patrolling the area in groups. If ever civilians infiltrate, the guards are instructed to prevent them from venturing in further through non-lethal means and turn them back around. Thankfully, containment of this particular anomaly has become more effective as technology has advanced. Reliable live video surveillance was established in the anomalous swampland of St. Landry Parish, and this has led to anomalous activity declining significantly, especially with regards to new human SCP-1692-3 specimens. The majority of SCP-1692-3 entities discovered as of late have instead been slightly mutated animals. Due to the strange and unpredictable nature of SCP-1692, its containment needs have been a consistent work in progress, earning it the Euclid Object Class. Any member of Foundation personnel at Level 2 clearance or above is privy to knowledge about this anomaly, and that's excellent, because this is one that should stir up a few important questions in all of us. After all, life is a long and winding road. How well can you remember your childhood? And perhaps even more importantly, how can you be sure that those memories really belong to you? Now go and watch another entry from the files of DrBob, like SCP-069, Second Chance, for another anomaly that raises some quite difficult questions about the nature of self. And make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single anomaly as we delve further and further into the SCP Foundation's classified archives. The old house has been abandoned for going on 2 decades. And as with any place that's been left uninhabited for this long, rumors tend to spiral. Of course, there are the more mundane explanations for why the 2-story, 4-bedroom home on the end of a nice street lays in semi-ruin. Black mold, asbestos, rising house prices. But those weren't the stories that most people told. Everyone in the neighborhood knew what really happened. All those years ago, the family that lived there had been murdered, and their killer was never caught. The 3 young paranormal investigators, with EMF readers in their hands and GoPro cameras mounted on their hard hats, know all about this. They approach the house in the dead of night, mumbling commentary for the recordings. If the old house really is as haunted as everyone says it is, then they could be in for something really good here. Their subscribers always loved brand new paranormal content. They use a crowbar to breach the front door and head inside. It's everything you can expect from a house that had been abandoned for 17 years. Dust, cobwebs, and graffiti abound, broken bottles scattered across the floor. Someone has scrawled, "Welcome to Hell," above the door in faded Sharpie. It all plays perfectly for the cameras. Paranormal content gold. All of them turn on their flashlights, generously provided to them by one of their sponsors, of course. But in this particular situation, they have no idea just how valuable their product really is. After all, there are some frightening things that hide in the dark. The leader of the trio begins ascending the stairs, narrating into his helmet cam, giving the more popular version of the house's legend. The perfect suburban family, torn apart, literally, by a killer hiding in their home. The family had all been brutally murdered by someone in their home, but the police never found any sign of unlawful entrance or exit. There were no clues to the killer's presence whatsoever, in fact. It was as if they were a ghost, a vapor. It was almost as though whoever killed the family had always been in that house, and even after the murders were committed, they never left the place either. As he tells the story, the lead investigator starts to feel a little nervous. Even though he himself doesn't really believe in the supernatural, he just plays up reactions for the views, he still can't help but wonder, should I really be here? Am I making a terrible mistake? Is there a chance that whatever did this all those years ago could still be in the house, waiting for me? But he pushes those thoughts from his mind. This gig is too valuable for him to wimp out now. And really, what are the chances that something actually dangerous would be lurking in the house? The other 2 investigators are still looking around downstairs, sticking together, their flashlight beams slicing through the darkness. Their boss always insists on going upstairs first. He demands the glory shot, after all. That leaves the rest of them searching the downstairs living room, dining room, and kitchen, where the best they can hope for is maybe a particularly haunted-looking dishwasher. It's why the younger of the 2 is so surprised when they suddenly feel something happening to their body that they've never experienced before. In an instant, their whole body convulses with an involuntary shudder. They feel the temperature drop, and the world gets just that little bit darker. The best way they can describe the feeling is impending doom. Like any moment now, something terrible is going to happen. But almost as soon as the feeling begins, it's gone. Intensity dropping, the dread starting to dissipate, as though whoever or whatever caused this feeling literally passed right through them. Their fellow investigator asks them if they're okay. Of course, they nod and force a smile. They're fine. It's just a spooky place, is all. Atmosphere like this would get to anyone. Meanwhile, the lead investigator is exactly where he wants to be, ascending a rickety stepladder up into the attic. The very same attic where, all those years ago, the police had found what was left of the family. And from everything he'd read on the subject, their remains weren't a pretty sight, even by true crime enthusiast standards. He enters the attic and shines his flashlight around, capturing all the dusty old boxes left to rot in the cold. He's engrossed in the macabre spectacle of what had once been the worst and final moments of a group of strangers' very real lives. The attic is full of spider webs and shadows. They're so ubiquitous that as the lead investigator pauses to tell his camera the next chapter of the grisly tale, he doesn't even notice one of the shadows peeling off of the wall behind him. It wafts silently towards him, like a gust of midnight air. Little by little, the blob of shadow starts to take on a vaguely human shape. It leans forward in the investigator's direction, arms extended like a classic movie monster. Long, dark claws slide out of its shadowy hands. Downstairs, the other two investigators hear the most terrible scream. For a moment, the more fantastical thought crosses their minds. Could this be one of the tormented souls of the departed family, longing to be heard after years of silence? Then it occurs to them that they recognize the scream. It belongs to their boss. The two of them charge up the stairs, flashlights in hand, as the screaming starts to become more desperate and pained, like that of a wounded animal with its leg caught in a trap. Those terrible wails are echoing down from the open hatch leading into the attic. It's so dark up there, something must have broken his flashlight. That's when they notice something else. Red, dripping from the open hatch. For a moment, they hesitate, wondering what could be going on up there. Could they really help, or would they just be running into the danger themselves? But soon, their desire to save their boss's life overpowers their fear. They grab the ladder and start climbing, feeling the dripping blood on the worn wooden rungs. When they finally get up into the attic, it feels like the scream is coming from everywhere, bouncing off the walls in a terrible, echoing cacophony of pain. They turn in all directions, hovering their flashlight beams around the room in wide, sweeping arcs, until both fall on the source of all this terror. And when they see it, they can't help but scream too. The lead investigator's body is floating about a foot off the ground, his screams now fading into pained gurgles. Something huge and dark is lifting him up with one hand and sinking the long, dark claws of its other into his neck. The second the twin flashlight beams concentrate on the creature, it drops the lead investigator's bleeding body down onto the ground. His skin slate gray, his feeble twitching slowing to a halt as the last of his life drains from him. Two glowing red pinpricks open up in the face of the dark figure, eyes like terrible, burning coals etching themselves into their memory. Like smoke, it continues to glide backwards further, seeking refuge in the dark, a safe haven amongst the other shadows. By this point, the two surviving investigators know there's nothing they can do for their boss anymore. All that's left is to get out and survive. They have to save themselves. They turn, wasting no time running towards the exit. They don't notice it, but the second they turn the beams of their flashlights away, the shadow's terrible eyes disappear, and it starts advancing towards them again, its claws outstretched and grasping for them with awful fury. The shadow creature grabs at their heads as they make their final leap for the exit. However, all the monster can pull away are their helmets and helmet cams as they scramble down the ladder and then down the stairs, running at speeds they didn't even think possible as the shadow slithers down behind them. It doesn't give up. It wants their lives. It wants their warm human blood on its claws. They clear the threshold of the accursed house and keep running to their car. One looks over their shoulder and sees the shadow leave the house, gaining on them, both claws outstretched and ready to rend their flesh. The two climb into their car. They see the shadow coming towards their window. It's moving so quickly, only a few feet away now. It's getting closer and closer and closer. Ignition. The car starts up and the driver smashes the pedal down. They take off, quickly accelerating up to illegal speeds as the shadow continues to chase, slowly getting smaller and smaller in the rearview mirror. A distant nightmare. A terrible, dark ghost. As it finally disappears, they feel a moment of safety. But really, only a moment. Because it occurs to them then that they cannot say with any confidence that this monster won't just be waiting for them when they get home. SCP-280, also known as Eyes in the Dark, is one of the more frightening and dangerous anomalies contained by the SCP Foundation. Of course, it likely won't be causing an XK-class end-of-the-world scenario anytime soon, but if you happen to run into this nocturnal monster, it's likely to cause an end-of-you scenario and remove you from the world with extreme prejudice. There's no way of telling just how many lives it claimed before the SCP Foundation finally got it into containment, and perhaps it's best to just not think about that. SCP-280 is a black wraith-like apparition that floats at roughly average human height, with no visible legs or feet, as the lower portion of its body simply fades away before it reaches the ground. In its dormant state, the entity may appear to be little more than a shadow, easily dismissed, especially in dark environments. This comes as a natural result of the being's frightening ability to become intangible at will, and only become physical when it enters a state of active aggression toward a human target. In this intangible state, victims have even been known to walk through the shadowy mass by accident. While this doesn't lead to any detrimental physical effects, victims report that being inside the creature can lead to heightened states of anxiety, fear, and dread. Despite its body being wholly composed of an unidentifiable black matter, when exposed to light, the creature does begin to express a pair of glowing dots on its head similar to eyes, hence its frightening nickname. However, all tests indicate that these eyes aren't actually functional. Instead, they appear to be a kind of defensive measure, like false eyes on the carapace of an insect. These eyes are never shown when SCP-280 is advancing towards a victim, only when it is in retreat, though this is only one of the entity's several defensive responses. If an area where the creature is residing becomes fully illuminated, or a sudden flash of extremely bright light is directed against it, then it will immediately dematerialize and appear in a different area. The one positive thing that can be said about the hunting patterns of SCP-280 is that they're relatively predictable. The entity, it seems, only has an interest in human beings. When it selects a target, it will pursue them relentlessly, approaching in its intangible form with its arms extended in what many describe as a sleepwalker pose. In this state, you may finally notice 280's claws, long, thin, and razor-sharp. It may silently approach while the victim is turned the other way, or while they sleep soundly in bed, or even when they're paralyzed in fear at the very sight of it. When SCP-280 closes the distance, it will begin to rip and tear at its victims with its claws, causing massive physical trauma and, in some cases, death. Attacks range from 1 to 5 minutes of being relentlessly clawed at by the beast. When the attack is over, it will simply expose its eyes, become intangible once more, and escape. You will not be able to overpower the creature. Foundation tests have shown that it has extreme physical strength, and it's capable of tearing apart solid steel with little effort. If it can't find any humans to victimize, then it will simply remain dormant, pressing itself up against a wall, in a dark corner, or within some other structure. Which is why, if ever you feel nervous about a certain dark corner in a room near you, it is best to remove yourself from the situation as quickly as possible and remain in a brightly lit area. It would perhaps be comforting to believe that SCP-280 is acting on some twisted form of animal instinct. After all, while the results may seem horrific to us, every organism has to eat, right? Well, sadly, that isn't the case here. SCP-280 does not appear to eat, sleep, or breathe to survive, and it never consumes any of the matter torn from its victims. The best working theory is that the entity simply enjoys the harm it causes, taking a degree of perverse pleasure in hunting down and murdering its targets. There is no better nature to appeal to here. The SCP Foundation's ability to study the creature's biology has also been stunted, in part due to the creature's highly aggressive nature, and also the fact that its selective intangibility makes gaining physical samples almost impossible. Even capturing and containing the creature in the first place came partially out of blind luck. It first came to Foundation attention after a series of mysterious locked-door murders in a small Mississippi township. In the most recent case, an entire family had been brutally murdered in their home, leaving only one survivor. A traumatized 9-year-old boy named David, who'd locked himself in the basement when he started to hear the screaming. He was so terrified by the things he saw that night that he remained in a catatonic state for weeks afterwards, completely unresponsive to outside stimulus. But one little detail saved his life. A flashlight was clasped in his white-knuckle grip, shining a bright beam of cold, white light onwards. When David was removed and placed into medical care, officers began searching the building for any kind of clues as to how the other 4 family members were murdered. However, during this investigation, the police were just as vulnerable as the victims who'd been so recently slain. While one officer was wandering around the attic, looking for any evidence they may have missed, SCP-280 emerged from the darkness and attacked, tearing into his body with its long, deadly claws. Luckily for the officer in question, he survived the incident, though he was badly wounded. His report on the matter, including the ardent claim that he was attacked by a being, quote, made from black smoke, caught the attention of SCP Foundation operatives embedded in the precinct. They soon took over the investigation and descended on the house, hoping to tag and bag whatever had been behind all these deaths. This would be easier said than done. While Foundation field agents canvassed the home, they simply walked past the creature multiple times, discounting it as a mere shadow. After all, it only had these easily identifiable glowing eyes when it was in a retreating position. Even when it entered its physical state, operatives brushing up against it generally dismissed the sensation as hair, clothing, or some other object touching them in the dark. This already bungled investigation got even worse when the Foundation decided to introduce high-intensity lights into the equation, hopefully flushing the creature out. This, of course, only caused it to dematerialize and appear elsewhere. The chase ended in an almost farcical fashion, a cavalcade of Foundation agents chasing a cloud of sneering black smoke across a Mississippi field at 2:30 a.m. Thankfully for the human race, the entity was, at the very least, eventually secured and contained. However, this wouldn't be the last time it was out of containment. During a series of tests with different types of illumination, intending to test SCP-280's reflexes, it disappeared from its chamber. It seemed almost to sink through the different levels of the illuminated site before coming to rest at the containment chamber holding SCP-1591. This made for a fascinating accidental cross-test. You see, SCP-1591, to put it simply, is a unique sculpture of a star that emits an incredibly bright light, and this light will slowly make any being subject to its glow intangible before disappearing completely. When SCP-280 came before SCP-1591, it displayed its eyes but did not retreat. In fact, it assumed a kneeling position and simply remained before the anomalous sculpture until it faded from existence. It then remanifested in its own containment chamber several hours later without incident. All things considered, it went pretty well as far as containment breaches involving deadly, human-hating monsters go. Because of its ability to demanifest and phase through solid objects, SCP-280 is incredibly difficult to contain, earning it the dreaded Keter object class. In order to avoid the risk of demanifestation, SCP-280 is contained in a 5x5 meter cell that is perpetually left in a state of total darkness. No equipment is to be left in the cell unsupervised at any time, and any items brought into the cell for testing must be removed when the testing is complete. Any staff members entering the chamber for tests must be equipped with infrared goggles, an infrared ID strobe, and also a strong flashlight to ward the creature off in the case that it becomes aggressive. If SCP-280 does attempt to attack anyone in the chamber, all attending staff are instructed to turn on their flashlights and turn the beams against the creature. No aggressive action is permitted, and staff members must remain at least 1 meter away from SCP-280 at all times for their own safety. And if you suddenly feel yourself getting a little nervous in an eerily dark room, I'd like you to remember this. The one thing more frightening than seeing eyes in the dark is not seeing them.
The girl has been sitting in the waiting room for at least 20 minutes now, curled up on a hard plastic chair and staring at an inspirational poster on the wall. Her eyes are bleary and unfocused, with heavy dark circles that indicate she hasn't been sleeping well. She tries to focus her attention on the poster and read the words, but she's having trouble concentrating. She keeps nodding off, only to jerk back to wakefulness when her head starts to sag. This is what life is like for her after weeks of insomnia. She was just about at the end of her rope, certain that this was going to be her life from now on, until she happened to see an ad in the newspaper for a study at a local sleep clinic. She doesn't think much of that sort of thing, but she's desperate for anything that might help her to get a good night's sleep. Eventually, the door opens, and a technician calls her into his office. The girl stumbles to her feet and drags herself inside. "Thanks for volunteering to be part of our study," says the technician. He's got a friendly smile and a soothing manner that instantly puts her at ease. It's obvious from his bedside manner that he's worked with lots of sleep-deprived patients before. He pulls out a clipboard and starts to make notes on a sheet of paper. "We've gone over your application, and we think that you would be a really good fit for this project." "Thank goodness," thinks the girl. She had just about given up hope after that long wait. She half expected that they would simply tell her that she didn't qualify and send her home to try and figure out how to get over her insomnia by herself. "So you've been having trouble sleeping," says the technician. "Tell me about that." The girl hunches her shoulders. "There's not much to tell. I've had sleep problems for years. I have really bad sleep apnea, so I've always been a rough sleeper. I toss and turn, and I wake up at least several times a night, but it's really gotten bad lately. I can barely even drift off to sleep these last few weeks." The technician nods. "That's exactly the kind of problem that we want to look into here," he says. "For this study, we're going to monitor you as you sleep and see if we can diagnose this problem." She nods. The technician keeps talking, but she's not listening. She doesn't really care about the details. The important thing is that she's going to finally get a decent night's sleep. The technician leads her to a laboratory, a large room with several simple cots arranged along the walls. Next to each cot, she sees a bank of odd electronic machines. She doesn't immediately know what they're for, but she can guess. She's participated in sleep studies before, in hopes that they might be able to help cure her issues, and they usually connect machines like these to your forehead as you sleep so that they can read your pulse and brain activity. "Sorry, it's not the most comfortable arrangement," says the technician, "but all you have to do is sleep. There's a bathroom down the hallway if you need to get ready for bed. When you're ready, we'll prepare you for the next step." The girl doesn't care if the cots aren't all that comfortable in the technician's opinion. This might as well be the plushest feather bed to her. After changing into her nightclothes and brushing her teeth, the girl returns to the lab.
She finds the technician waiting for her, holding what appears to be a perfectly ordinary CPAP machine. The girl, of course, recognizes this device. She's used these things on multiple occasions in her desperation to find a solution to her sleep apnea. They're supposed to help open up the breathing passageways to increase airflow and thus reduce the incidence of sleep apnea, but the girl has never had much luck with them. She frowns. If this study is just testing a new sort of CPAP machine, she doesn't have a lot of faith that it's going to help her much. The technician notices her dismay. "I know that you've probably used these before," he says. "This is just the first step. We want to see how your sleep cycles react to ordinary treatments before we try anything more radical." "Okay, sure." The girl doesn't have the strength to argue. She's bone tired, and she's ready to collapse into bed. Without another word, she takes the CPAP mask from the technician and straps it to her face. She climbs into bed, and the technician attaches the hose to the machine next to the bed. He switches it on, and the machine begins to emit a familiar, comforting hum. The technician attaches several electrodes to the girl's cheeks and forehead. He starts to explain that these will allow him to monitor her sleep cycles and check for any anomalous reactions. She's barely listening at this point. "I'll just be monitoring you from the next room," says the technician, pointing to a video camera in the corner of the ceiling. "So don't worry about anything. If there are any problems, I'll be watching." The girl barely has the strength to nod her head in response. She's so incredibly tired. Already she's drifting into oblivion. The room is swimming before her eyes, her mind distracted by hypnagogic illusions. The technician's voice sounds like it's a million miles away. She's practically already dreaming. Her eyes close before he even leaves the room. The technician takes his station at his desk, sitting before a bank of video monitors. The grainy gray feed from the security camera shows that the girl is fast asleep in her bunk, her chest rising and falling rhythmically with her breathing. Nothing unusual going on so far. The technician takes a sip from a mug of coffee and prepares for another boring night of watching someone else sleep. Of course, he hopes that the information gleaned from his observations might be of use in helping this girl to solve her sleep problems. And he hopes in turn, that might help other people with similar sleep apnea issues as well. But for now, he's just staring at the screen with half-hearted interest. At first, everything is quiet. The CPAP machine seems to be doing the trick, allowing the girl to breathe quietly and sleep peacefully. The technician watches without interest as the girl progresses through the different levels of sleep, the monitors in front of him reflecting the changes in her biorhythms. It isn't until she reaches her second round of REM sleep, the stage in which a sleeper dreams, that something strange happens. Under her eyelids, the girl's pupils quickly flick back and forth, almost as if she's watching a film. This is totally normal behavior, of course, during REM sleep. The technician barely even looks up as the monitors register her transition into this new sleep stage. He's been working at the sleep clinic for long enough that he knows to expect this. He might not have even looked up if his coffee cup hadn't happened to finally run out. When he hefts his empty mug, mumbling to himself in annoyance that now he's going to have to walk all the way across the facility to refill it at the coffee machine in the break room, that's when he finally catches sight of it. It happens so suddenly that at first, the technician doesn't believe his eyes. He thinks it must be a glitch in the hardware or possibly that his own eyes are playing tricks on him. He has been drinking a lot of coffee to stay awake after all. But no, it's really there. He can see that there is a second person in the room now, a large, dark silhouette standing over the girl as she sleeps. He blinks in surprise. How did someone get into the building, much less the laboratory, without him knowing? The figure is silent and motionless. It hardly seems threatening, but at the same time, it's hard not to read someone as threatening when they break into your room and stare at you as you sleep. As he watches, the figure starts to change subtly before his eyes. Soon, it's not just a solid blob of shadow. It's coalesced into a human figure, that of a large male humanoid. Its torso bulging with muscles, its arms laced with sinews, but instead of a face, this figure has the gleaming white skull of a horse. It remains standing over the girl. The girl snorts and turns in her sleep, grunting and mumbling. She's acting as if she's caught in an especially troubling nightmare and is struggling to wake up. The creature standing over her does not react to her movements, instead, staring down at her with an eerie, unflappable calm. The grainy camera footage makes it hard to make out the details, but the technician is almost certain he can see the tiniest flicker, like the reflection of light in a dilated pupil, in the empty sockets of the mysterious stranger's skull. The skull doesn't react. How could it react, after all? It's just a skull. But its silence, with that rictus grin and empty sockets, only makes it more frightening than if it had reacted. The technician gulps and rises to his feet, his knees shaking. He can't let this go on. He doesn't know what kind of practical joke is going on, but he did promise the girl that he would be responsible for her safety if anything weird happened. More to the point, the presence of this masked stranger might jeopardize the results of the study. He hurries from the office, making a beeline for the laboratory. He doesn't exactly know what he's going to say or do when he confronts this stranger. He just knows that he has to do it. But then, he starts to feel sleepy himself. The closer he gets to the laboratory, the more his own body starts to defy him. His limbs feel rubbery, his eyes feel heavy, and his thoughts start to swim. Despite all the coffee in his system, he also feels himself succumbing to sleep. He's only 50 yards from the door when he finally collapses into a heap on the floor. His eyes remain wide open, staring sightlessly ahead of him, and his mouth gapes like a fish out of water. Whatever he's experiencing, whether it's something that only he can see or something in his mind, his expression reveals only abject terror. Meanwhile, at the exact moment that the technician collapses, the figure standing over the girl in the lab blinks momentarily out of existence, as if somehow reacting to the commotion outside. And when it returns, it isn't alone. A second dark figure has also appeared in the room. It too starts life as an indistinct, only vaguely humanoid shadow, but quickly starts to gain form. This one is different from the first. It's a female body, but the figure's head has a blank face devoid of eyes, mouth, or nose. This second figure ignores the sleeping girl or her strange, stoic, horse-headed observer. Instead, it starts to move, ambling toward the western wall of the room, as if it knows that the comatose technician is directly on the other side. When it reaches the wall, it does not pause. It simply phases through the solid structure, disappearing through the brick and mortar and reappearing in the hallway beyond. The faceless woman approaches the prone body of the technician. It squats down next to him and puts its hand under his chin, turning his head so that it can stare into his eyes, or stare as effectively as possible when it doesn't have any eyes of its own. After a few moments of silent contemplation, the faceless creature places its hand against the technician's forehead. Slowly, its hand starts to move through his head, reaching deep into his skull, as if its hand was as insubstantial as a ghost. Just as this mysterious nightmare creature was able to phase through the wall, it appears to be able to phase through flesh as well. After several moments, the faceless woman withdraws its hand and drops the technician's head. He slumps to the ground in response. The faceless woman stands up, and then it vanishes instantly. At the exact same time, the girl in the other room snorts and stirs. She blinks her eyes open. For a moment, she doesn't remember where she is. Her eyes scan the unfamiliar room for several seconds before she recalls that she was participating in a sleep study. That's right, she was trying to find out if she could find any help for her sleep apnea. Ironically, she actually slept better than normal. As she removes the CPAP mask, she wonders if maybe she ought to see about buying one of these for herself. This particular model seems to work better than the one she's tried in the past. She stretches and sits up. Just then, the technician bursts into the room. He's panicked and out of breath, and he whips his head back and forth in search of the mysterious horse-headed stranger. But there's no sign of the creature now. Just like the faceless woman, it seems to have vanished without a trace. The girl stares at him in confusion. Why is he so upset? She has no clue about what happened while she was asleep. "Did you see it?" says the technician breathlessly. "The creature! The shadow creature!" The girl raises a skeptical eyebrow. "What are you talking about?" she says. "I just woke up." The technician starts to sputter out an explanation, but the girl just rolls her eyes. She came here to get help with her sleep, but it sounds like the technician is the one who's got a real problem. His breathless descriptions of a horse-headed monster and a faceless woman clearly sound like bad dreams to her. You would think that a guy running a sleep study wouldn't be so easily confused like that. She's pretty sure that he probably just fell asleep at his station, and now he's embarrassed to admit that he just had a bad dream. Little do either of them know that although they won't see the strange entities again, those creatures are always going to be very, very close to them going forward. What a nightmare. But what seems like just a bad dream is, in fact, an anomaly well known to the SCP Foundation. It's formally been designated as SCP-3060, but agents more often refer to it as the Dream Machine. Instances of SCP-3060 are small medical devices that superficially resemble continuous positive airway pressure, or CPAP machines. The individual materials that compose SCP-3060 instances are non-anomalous and operate in the same way as a typical CPAP machine of its size and make. The Foundation currently has 5 instances of SCP-3060 in its custody. SCP-3060's anomalous effects become apparent when worn by a sleeping human. When an individual wearing an instance of SCP-3060 enters their second REM cycle, a humanoid incorporeal entity, hereafter referred to as SCP-3060-A, will appear within a 5-meter radius of the individual and stand over them until they wake up. At this point, SCP-3060-A will disappear, and the individual wearing SCP-3060 will become infected. From that point on, regardless as to whether the individual wears SCP-3060, the same SCP-3060-A entity will appear when they enter their second REM cycle each night and remain watching over them until awakening. While instances of SCP-3060-A appear as featureless silhouettes upon their first manifestation, they quickly take on a unique shape based on each infected individual. SCP-3060-A entities have no standard appearance, and it is not clear what factors determine the final form of any individual SCP-3060-A. Since the manifestations are connected with REM sleep, agency researchers speculate that an SCP-3060-A's appearance may be influenced by an infected sleeper's dreams. So far, observed SCP-3060-A's have included a human infant composed entirely of fused teeth, an eyeless elderly woman dressed in dark clothes, a partially disintegrated humanoid composed of ash and dressed in red lingerie, a naked humanoid covered in tire tracks and showing signs of severe crush injuries, a humanoid whose torso consisted of a large mouth, and a clown. Some researchers have noted that the initial shadowy appearances of SCP-3060-A recall descriptions of entities reported during bouts of sleep paralysis, but so far, no conclusive link has been found. While an SCP-3060-A instance is present, any person standing within a 50-meter radius of the infected sleeper will enter a catatonic state. At this point, an additional instance of SCP-3060-A will appear. The additional SCP-3060-A entity will then approach the catatonic subject, phasing through solid matter if the subject is in a separate room. Upon arriving at the subject, the new SCP-3060-A instance will phase its hand through the subject's skull and then vanish, causing the subject to fall asleep immediately. All subjects touched by the SCP-3060-A entity in this manner will become new instances of SCP-3060 infected upon awakening. Awakening an infected sleeper will cause the attending SCP-3060-A to immediately vanish and catatonic subjects to regain movement. All attempts to communicate with SCP-3060-A instances have thus far been unsuccessful. People infected by SCP-3060 will inevitably suffer long-term health effects, most often associated with severe sleep deprivation. After 3 days, infected individuals begin to display fatigue, mood changes, impaired performance, and memory problems, all of which are so severe that even obtaining a full night's sleep does little to dent their impact. Infected individuals often report frequent nightmares, though no central themes or correlations have been observed in the content of these dreams, nor do they seem to correspond with the appearance of the infected persons attending SCP-3060-A. Within a month, infected individuals will start having visual and auditory hallucinations, as well as delusions that their mind is being controlled by some outside force. Soon after, infected individuals descend into full psychosis as they become unable to distinguish the content of their dreams from reality. In extreme cases, after at least 2 months of infection, hair loss, conitis subita, partial or complete blindness, somatic complaints, cataplexy, and alien limb syndrome have been observed. Attempts by medical staff to alleviate these conditions in the long term have thus far been met with failure, although sleep deprivation has ironically proven effective in temporarily delaying the onset of more severe symptoms. If no human subjects enter the area of an SCP-3060 infected individual's effect during REM sleep for 7 consecutive days, or the infected individual dies, an instance of SCP-3060-A will appear. The SCP-3060-A entity will then proceed to search for the nearest sleeping human. Upon locating a sleeper, SCP-3060-A will stand over them until they enter their next REM sleep cycle, at which point, the SCP-3060-A entity will reach into their skull and vanish. At this point, the sleeping individual will become infected. If the sleeping individual wakes up before the process is complete, or if SCP-3060-A cannot locate a suitable subject within 3 hours, it will vanish without spreading the SCP-3060 infection. In one experiment, an infected individual was placed in a standard humanoid containment cell. 4 D-Class personnel were placed in adjoining cells. When the infected individual fell asleep and entered their second REM cycle, an SCP-3060-A entity appeared with predictable results. The first SCP-3060-A to appear resembled a headless humanoid with its arms and legs replaced by spinal columns. It stood above the infected sleeper, watching without movement, even as 4 additional instances of SCP-3060-A manifested inside the cell. All 5 SCP-3060-A instances stood in silent observation of the infected sleeper for approximately 5 minutes. By this point, all 4 D-Class personnel in adjoining cells had gone into catatonic states, seeing as they were within the 50 square meter blast zone established by the initial SCP-3060-A. Each D-Class personnel who was awake at the time of manifestation was observed to have frozen with expressions of extreme distress on their face. The 4 additional SCP-3060-A instances then began to disperse, each one moving toward a different D-Class personnel's cell, phasing through solid matter as necessary to reach the intended target. Each additional SCP-3060-A instance completed its manifestation by reaching into the skull of its target and then subsequently assuming a definite, final form before vanishing. The 4 additional SCP-3060-As, respectively, took on the appearance of a male human with mathematical symbols in place of facial features, a humanoid composed of tightly wound thread, a featureless white humanoid dressed in a Foundation lab coat, and a featureless black humanoid dressed in a hodgepodge of regalia from different authoritarian regimes. The initial SCP-3060-A continued to stand in silent observation of the original infected sleeper after the other instances vanished, remaining so for the rest of the night until she woke up. Since SCP-3060 has not been found to differ in any way from a normal CPAP machine, SCP agents currently know very little about how SCP-3060 can cause these manifestations, who is manufacturing SCP-3060, or for what purpose. At this time, the only advice that SCP researchers can offer is this: if you're having trouble sleeping and want to make use of a CPAP machine, make sure you're buying a name brand. Otherwise, you might just be opening yourself up to a world of nightmares, insomnia, and silent but all too present nocturnal visitors.
Watch this, the teenage boy says before jumping his skateboard up onto the stair railing. His friends watch in amazement as he deftly guides his board down the long rail. They hoot and holler in support until suddenly, the boy seems to lose his balance. He falls from the rail and tumbles down the stairs of the large parking garage where they had been practicing their skateboarding tricks. The boy hits the ground at the end of the stairs, and all of his friends go quiet. The boy is stunned, but eventually he opens his eyes and stands up, but none of his friends can do anything except stare. "Oh no, oh no, oh no," the boy says as he looks down at his arm, which is now bent at a 90-degree angle in a spot where no joint should exist. The children watching all begin to scream, and one, unsure of what else to do, turns and runs. "What do I do? What do I do?" the boy with the broken arm says to no one and everyone. Luckily, one of the group quickly collects herself and steps forward to take control of the situation. "Come on," she says. "We're getting you to the hospital." The girl puts her arm around him on his non-damaged side and helps him to the street, where they have a stroke of good luck. Parked just a block away is an ambulance. "Hey!" the girl cries out, waving towards the ambulance. The paramedics inside must have seen her, because the ambulance's lights immediately come on and it drives the short distance to them. The ambulance stops and 2 paramedics quickly exit the vehicle. The paramedics don't even need to ask what happened. They can obviously see from the unnatural angle of the boy's arm that he needs immediate medical attention, and they quickly place him into the back of the ambulance. The girl begins to pull herself into the back as well, but is quite forcefully shoved back into the street. "Patients only," is the sole response from the paramedic who pushed her before he slams the door shut. The girl gets a brief look at her friend's frightened face through the back window as the ambulance speeds away. Several days later, the children are sitting outside of the same parking structure, but none of them are in any mood to skate. All they can think about is their missing friend. Neither the boy's parents nor the police have any idea what happened to him or where he went. There's no records at any of the local hospitals of him ever being brought there, nor does there seem to be any evidence of this particular ambulance having existed at all. No one even seems to believe the children that he got into an ambulance. The whole story just seems too far-fetched and outlandish, but the children know what they saw. As they discuss the events for the 100th or perhaps 1000th time, one of the smallest of the group suddenly stands up and points. "There it is!" The rest of the group looks in the direction he's motioning and sees the same thing. It's the ambulance. None of them know what to do as the vehicle flies past them.
this time with no lights on, and comes to a stop a block away from where they first spotted it. They watch as the two paramedics exit the vehicle and go around to the back. It's hard to see from this distance, but it looks as though they took something out of the rear of the ambulance, something that requires both of them to lift before dropping it on the sidewalk behind some trash cans. The children watch as the paramedics get back into the ambulance and drive away, disappearing just as quickly as they appeared. After a moment of shock, they all in unison begin running to the place where the ambulance stopped. They come to a skidding halt just in front of the trash cans. None of them can do anything except stare until they all break out into screams, one of the children turning and immediately running away. And they have good reason to scream, because in front of them is their friend. His arm is no longer broken, appearing to have been somehow repaired in just a matter of days, but it is also no longer attached to his shoulder. The boy opens his eyes as his friends scream, and looks down to see that his arms and legs have been reattached at a new angle, jutting out from his back, leaving him standing on all fours, his face staring up at the sky like some kind of twisted animal. What happened to this young man was tragic, but he wasn't the first victim of this strange malicious anomaly, and unfortunately, neither would he be the last, because this was SCP-4419, also known as the Butcher's Chariot. SCP-4419 appears to be a seemingly normal vehicle which resembles a standard ambulance, though the exact make and model varies between manifestations. This anomalous ambulance will appear spontaneously in locations where a medical emergency of some kind is about to take place. Just how SCP-4419 is able to predict where and when these events will take place is unknown, nor is it understood how it always takes the form of an ambulance that resembles one appropriate to the local area. Once the medical event has occurred, whether that be a minor injury like a sprain or something more serious, such as a gunshot wound, SCP-4419 will quickly approach the injured individual. Two individuals which have a humanoid appearance and are dressed in paramedic uniforms that are, just like the ambulance, always appropriate to the location, will exit the ambulance. They will then secure the victim, using a stretcher if need be, and place them in the back of the ambulance. While the individuals who emerge from SCP-4419 will, for the most part, act as though they are normal medical professionals, they will strongly resist any attempt to either impede them in their quest to secure the injured person, as well as prevent anyone else except for their target from getting into the back of the SCP-4419 ambulance, up to and including the use of extreme physical force. As soon as the paramedic-appearing individuals have managed to secure the victim in the back of the ambulance, it will then quickly leave the area at a high rate of speed, and research has shown that as soon as it is out of observation, SCP-4419 will demanifest, along with whoever is inside. But this isn't the end of what this anomaly has in store for its victim. Between 2 and 7 days later, the SCP-4419 ambulance will suddenly reappear at the same area where it picked up its victim. The same individuals will exit the ambulance and leave the victim somewhere nearby before getting back in the vehicle and leaving the scene once again. The victim who is left behind will always have suffered what can only be described as invasive bodily modifications. Their injuries are so extreme that in most cases they should have resulted in the death of the victim, and yet they will always somehow still be alive. While the exact form of modification will vary from victim to victim, there does appear to be some correlation between the original medical emergency and the resulting procedure. And the SCP Foundation has documented a number of encounters with SCP-4419, stretching all the way back to the early 1980s. Some notable examples include one from 1983, in which a pedestrian who was crossing the street was struck by an automobile, resulting in them breaking their leg. SCP-4419 was on site and quickly helped the man into the back of the ambulance. When he was returned several days later, all of his limbs had been reattached in such a way that they were protruding from the front of his torso. In another event which occurred in 1994, a man suffered a broken jaw in a fight outside of a bar. To no surprise, SCP-4419 was on hand and took the man away for treatment. When he was next seen, his jaw had been permanently forced open, and a glass window had been installed in the back of his throat, which permitted direct viewing of his heart, which had also been moved to the back of the throat. Unfortunately, there was no way to reverse this procedure, and the man had to be euthanized. In 2003, a husband and wife were in a car accident where they each sustained multiple broken bones. When SCP-4419 dropped them back off, the two had been fused together at the back, and any bones that were broken in the crash had been removed completely. When an elderly gentleman had a heart attack in 2006, He was picked up by SCP-4419 and returned with 11 new, non-functioning hearts grafted inside of his body. Attempts were made to remove these additional hearts through surgery, but unfortunately, the man did not survive the procedure. In 2008, a structure fire resulted in 19 people suffering extreme burns. 7 more injuries came when a crowd attempted to stop the SCP-4419 paramedics from placing all of the victims in the back of the ambulance, but they were unsuccessful in preventing them from leaving the scene with them. When the group of victims was finally returned, it was as a single organism, a large solitary mass which twitches and shivers when physical contact is applied. No method for euthanizing this organism has been able to be found, and currently they are stored inside of a tank at Site-31. In perhaps the strangest sighting of SCP-4419, a U.S. private was wounded while on patrol in Afghanistan, and a military medical evacuation vehicle arrived to evacuate him. Suspicious about the vehicle's sudden appearance and the forceful conduct of the medical staff, the private's fellow soldiers ended up opening fire on the vehicle. They reported seeing a viscous black fluid leaking from the vehicle's surface, but they were unable to stop it from taking the injured private. In a deviation from its normal behavior, the victim was not returned to the same place, and instead appeared in the barracks the next day. The victim had been broken down into a thin paste and was spread across the walls. Agents were dispatched to secure what was left of the man, and they reported finding a still intact eyeball that dilated when they approached. The collected viscera has been labeled as remains and placed in storage, but it is currently unknown whether or not the victim has truly expired. Due to the danger SCP-4419 presents to anyone who suffers an injury, as well as its ability to appear virtually anywhere on the planet, it has been classified as Keter. Containment efforts at this point are largely focused on maintaining information control and post-manifestation cleanup, as opposed to any attempts at physical confinement. Anyone who witnesses an SCP-4419 manifestation is to be administered amnestics, and victims are to be treated in order to restore them to their original physical state as much as possible, or euthanized when no viable medical treatments are available, with a cover story constructed in order to explain their death. SCP-4419 is one of the most cruel and sadistic anomalies in the SCP Foundation's database, ranking right up there with SCP-106, the Old Man. Hopefully one day we will find a means to contain this brutal so-called medical vehicle, but until then, be careful if you suffer an injury and an ambulance is suddenly on hand. You might come back changed in ways you never thought possible.
In the nightmare, you're being chased by something you can never quite make out. It's a tall, dark figure with too many hands, but no face. In the nightmare, you're running down a hallway that keeps getting longer as the monster gains on you. All those grasping hands. One of them reaches out, grabs the scruff of your neck with long, icy fingers, and you jolt upright in bed in a cold sweat, breathing hard, eyes darting around the room as it comes into focus, treating every shadow with terrible suspicion. There's this awful feeling in the air. It's heavy on you, like a weighted blanket, some terrible new atmosphere. This is more than just the nightmare come-down. You know, in your pounding little heart, that there's something in the house. Something that means you and everyone you love some terrible harm. If it hasn't done that already. There are footsteps coming down the hall, slow and creaking. Why, tonight of all nights, did you choose to leave your bedroom door open? Your growing sense of anxiety at least subsides a little when you see a familiar silhouette in the doorway. The shape of your mother come to check on you. You must have been talking in your sleep. "Everything okay, sweetie?" she asks. But that is not your mother's voice. "Mom?" you ask back, small and trembling. She steps into the room, half bathed in the light of the moon shining in through your bedroom window. It's her, but something's wrong. She's wearing a strange mask, like something you'd see above the doors to an old-fashioned theater, cast in grinning porcelain. And her skin, it's a moribund shade of off-white, like a corpse just before it starts rotting. "Why so glum, honey?" The thing that you're sure is not your mother says. She walks toward you, and your whole body tenses up. You want to run, you want to scream, but it's like invisible hands are holding you still. The woman in the mask sits at the foot of your bed. "Where's Dad?" is all you can manage. That's when you notice the kitchen knife in her hand, stained with something that looks black in the moonlight. The thing in the mask laughs and asks if you want to go see him. You don't answer. In a week's time, when it becomes suspicious to friends and neighbors that nobody has left the house in all those days, the police will intrude. They'll find a home that's devoid of all life, and a particularly memorable corpse sitting at the dining room table. It's so rotten it looks almost like it's been burned, despite no other signs of fire in the house. And the pristine white mask still fixed to its face, a strand of black ichor dripping out of its frowning mouth. What you just encountered is a unique anomaly, even among the thousands contained by the SCP Foundation. They have it on file as SCP-035, the Possessive Mask. By now, you know that the Foundation wields unparalleled knowledge in the fields of everything from paranormal happenings, extra-dimensional entities, and the dark art of thaumaturgy. But even amongst that knowledge, the true nature of SCP-035 remains a frightening question mark. To the untrained eye, it looks like little more than a white porcelain comedy mask. Or was it a tragedy mask? According to the first set of researchers assigned to the 035 case, God rest their souls, the expression on the Possessive Mask's face has been known to change between the two, and when it does so, all photographic evidence depicting the mask will also change to match it. And this is one of the minor ways that the mask gets into your head and starts to influence your mind. One constant is that when viewed from the front, a foul-smelling black liquid seems to weep and drool from the eyes and mouth of the mask. This liquid, still unquantified by Foundation research, is highly toxic and corrosive to the touch, gradually breaking down any matter that it comes into contact with, organic or otherwise. Experimentation has yielded the fact that it affects glass the slowest of all, but even then, everything breaks down eventually. If ever you're unlucky enough to find yourself in the presence of the Possessive Mask, you may be able to look beyond all that. You'll find it charming, enticing even. If you pass within 6 feet of the mask, you'll even feel a strong desire to put it on. Like its black tendrils are slithering in between the folds of your mind, like it's always been there. Like its thoughts and yours are simply one and the same. And if you put on the mask, giving in to what it wants, that will soon be the case. The second the mask comes into contact with the face of a viable host, either a sentient being or an empty humanoid vessel like a mannequin or a corpse, it will produce a powerful alternate brainwave pattern. In a sentient being like you, this alternate pattern will nullify and erase your consciousness, resulting in immediate death. Think of it like a new landlord evicting an old tenant before moving in himself. When possessed by SCP-035, the mask's corroding effect becomes localized and accelerated on its host, slowly breaking down the body until it's completely inoperable, a lifeless, corroded husk. At this point, it will need to seek a new host. Concerningly for the Foundation, however, the mask can still operate its host after they've sustained a level of damage impossible to survive for any non-anomalous person. SCP-035 has been shown actively possessing hosts that looked like cadavers in an advanced state of decay, causing additional psychological distress to anyone witnessing. But don't make the mistake of thinking that 035, in possession of a host, is some mere mindless zombie. It might be the costliest mistake you ever make. The Possessive Mask is one of the most intelligent, articulate, and manipulative anomalies the SCP Foundation has ever contained, showing a highly magnetic and charismatic personality, capable of conversing at length with the researchers studying it. At times, according to some reports, it seemed as though the mask was the one studying them. It's prone to flattery, slowly warming up its targets, eroding their barriers, letting their guard down. During intelligence and aptitude tests, SCP-035 has consistently been superlative. It also displays remarkable emotional intuition, as well as a photographic memory. The mechanisms behind the nature of the Possessive Mask still elude its most dogged researchers, but in my own humble opinion, the question has a deceptively simple answer. The Possessive Mask is evil. Pure and undiluted evil in its rawest and most malevolent form. The entity is not hateful. In fact, I'd venture to say that it's full of love. And what it loves most is breaking the minds of human beings. Through mere conversations with the mask, the psyches of researchers have been irreparably shattered. It has driven victims to dangerous actions for themselves and others. Murder, torture, indiscriminate violence, all for no other reason than to satisfy its personal sense of sadism. The mask has boasted that it has a complete understanding of the human mind, and given enough time, it could destroy or reshape the mind of anyone simply by talking to them. It's an advanced form of neuro-linguistic programming that the Foundation's finest minds can't even come close to cracking. Researchers with multiple PhDs and years in the fields of anomalous research had been reduced to mindless slaves over the course of a single interview, something that the mask takes a perverse pleasure in. And if you believe that you would be the exception, that you could match wills with the porcelain monster and come out the victor, then you're exactly the kind of mark it seeks. People are often most vulnerable when they're confident. SCP-035 is one of the most dangerous and intelligent Keter-class anomalies that the Foundation have ever encountered, and thus, it requires an exceptional level of precaution and containment with multiple layers of defense. Most immediately, the anomalous mask is contained within a specially created unit composed out of 5 panels of hermetically sealed, 4-inch thick glass. Seeing as glass reacts the slowest to the mask's corrosive black excretions, it's the best compromise for keeping the horrible thing under lock and key, at least for certain intervals of time. The larger containment chamber is reinforced with iron, steel, and lead, and the doors to the chamber are to be triple locked at all times, with the only exception being when researchers are allowed into and out of the room. Outside, no fewer than 2 armed guards stand watch to halt any unauthorized entrances with potentially lethal force. These guards are not allowed to enter the containment chamber, for fear that they'll fall under the mask's thrall. An on-site psychologist performs regular checks on all of the staff members working with or even in proximity to SCP-035, checking for any potential signs of influence or mental instability. Due to the aforementioned corrosive effect of SCP-035 excretions, the smaller glass containment unit needs to be replaced every 2 weeks, with the previous containment unit being disposed of via SCP-101, a living leather satchel with an extra-dimensional interior. Anyone who comes into contact with the mask while it's possessing a host is required to undergo immediate psychological evaluation from a trained professional. For many anomalies, establishing rigorous containment procedures would be the ultimate solution. But nothing is ever simple with the possessive mask. You see, it was first discovered in the early 1800s in the city of Venice. City authorities were breaking into an abandoned house, a stately manor on the outskirts, the occupants of which hadn't been seen in years. Inside the manor, they found a sealed tomb, and inside that sealed tomb, covered in written pleas to never free its contents, they found what would one day be known as SCP-035. The owner was long gone. To the city authorities of 1800s Venice, he seemed like a madman, his home full of countless notebooks, all littered with deranged scrawlings. He seemed to be obsessed with a place known as Alagada, though they had records of no such place. The mask's whereabouts became unknown for a time after that, though everywhere it went, death and destruction seemed to follow. The Foundation has an entire separate team dedicated to connecting historical murders and disappearances that may have involved the mask, in hopes of tracking its entire sordid tale. But after being interred at a Foundation containment site, the mask started a new reign of terror within the Foundation's very walls. A month after it was first contained, violence broke out in the facility. Right under the Foundation's nose, the mask had been manipulating the personnel on the research team, recruiting them to its sinister and mysterious cause. They started murdering their own comrades to create a distraction, while others attempted to smuggle 035 and its glass containment unit out of the site. Luckily, site security cottoned on before the plan could succeed in its ultimate objective. They intercepted and terminated the mutineers who had been manipulated by the mask's anomalous influence and returned it back to its chamber. All the survivors involved in the incident were transferred off-site for extensive psychological counseling. But this was just the beginning. The incident made the Foundation conduct further research into the anomaly's means of manipulation and discovered that SCP-035 was capable of telepathy, even when not attached to a host. This both accounted for its ability to influence people to put on the mask, as well as how it so thoroughly corrupted and controlled the former staff members who performed the insurrection on its behalf. This discovery resulted in the Foundation exercising further caution around which subjects were permitted to interact with SCP-035. Despite how intelligent and superficially charming it seemed at any point, there was no doubt they were dealing with a sadistic puppet master. All this was bad enough, but the Foundation grew substantially more concerned when it started taking interest in more ambitious potential hosts. SCP-682, the hard-to-kill reptile, and SCP-4715, a demon born of war. Both are immensely violent and powerful anomalies with regenerative capabilities, and that's exactly why the Foundation believes 035 is taking such an interest. Either might be passively regenerative enough to counteract the corrosive effect that the possessive mask has on its hosts, potentially giving it a permanent, not to mention extremely dangerous, body. Extra measures were put in place in hopes of ensuring that such an outcome never transpired, but the mask just seemed to take that as a challenge. There were a string of other escape attempts in the months that followed, all accompanied by a number of Foundation casualties. Site Command reviewed the incident logs, including all the gory details, and correctly concluded that the possessive mask was too dangerous an anomaly to be given any leeway whatsoever. They demanded that it be permanently sealed in its containment chamber and all of its host privileges revoked. It was this move that revealed just how many loyalists the mask had created in the site. There were large internal protests at the news that its steady supply of mannequin and corpse hosts were being revoked, with some of these 035 devotees taking their violent aggression out on their fellow staff members. This resulted in several murders and several more terminations of compromised personnel. Site Command dictated from that point on that staff on the 035 case be profiled and rotated frequently, with any direct or proximity contact with 035 kept to a minimum. But once again, this well-intentioned move didn't stymie the mask's effort. They just encouraged it to up its game. Soon, staff members who weren't even working with the mask, but just so happened to be working within 10 meters of its containment cell, started to bear the brunt of its secondary anomalous effects. They reported hearing unintelligible whispers, as well as a pervasive sense of unease. Some even reported the onset of severe migraines that were disrupting their ability to work. No apparent superficial changes were detected in the mask while all of this unfolded. Some of the researchers working with 035 suggested reinstating the mask's host privileges in hopes of appeasing it, but this motion was denied. Site Command refused to give in to what they saw as the mask's cruel and petty intimidation tactics. What followed was the mother of all dirty protests and would mark a substantial escalation in the mask's campaign of psychological terror. The walls themselves in 035's cell started to secrete copious amounts of black fluid, analysis of which revealed that it was composed mostly of human blood, with a number of other alien toxins and contaminants. The substance, much like the one that leaks from the front of the mask's eyes and mouth, was highly corrosive and began eating through the structural integrity of the walls. But this wasn't just random. Foundation personnel quickly noted that the corrosive sludge was forming clear shapes on the walls, full sentences in a number of different languages, including Greek, Italian, Latin, and Sanskrit, which a research team were put in charge of translating. In addition to the sentences, there were also complex diagrams depicting acts of ritual sacrifice, all involving members of staff working at that very site. During this time, the mask's powers of corrosion also seemed to increase, destroying its glass containment unit and warranting replacement at increasing speeds. On some occasions, the glass would simply shatter, leading to a sudden spike in the severity of the anomaly's effects. There were 6 casualties and 3 deaths during the cleanup efforts. In this war of attrition, it was clear that the Foundation was losing, so Site Command began resorting to anomalous countermeasures. This included lining the walls of 035's cell with SCP-148, an anomalous alloy known as Telekill, for its ability to dampen telepathic abilities. Getting any other anomaly to interact with the possessive mask could have unpredictable and potentially dangerous results, but with researchers and guards dropping like flies, they were running out of options. In a rare win for Site Command, the Telekill did its job, reducing the amount of deaths for people working in proximity to the outside of the possessive mask's containment cell. However, every action has an equal and opposite reaction, and the measures to prevent the mask's power from proliferating had the unintended result of concentrating its anomalous effects with far greater potency in the containment chamber itself. Researchers working on the case referred to it as a kind of anomalous greenhouse effect. In practical terms, this made the containment cell an incredibly dangerous place to be for human beings. Subjects inside the room reported the sounds of unintelligible yet deafening voices, a general sense of dread, and a gamut of negative emotions, from depression to fear to outright rage. Spending 3 hours in the cell had even more severe effects: bleeding from the eyes and mouth, destructive tendencies, hostility to others, and the constant ringing of cruel laughter in their ears. At this point, the afflicted person was likely to slip into a state of irretrievable psychosis, the inherent mechanisms of their minds warped by the dark power of the mask. The team instructed to decode the writing that appeared on the wall were also found dead, having suffered violent demises. SCP-035 clearly had no intention of letting up. Cleanup efforts on the leaking walls also hit a diabolical roadblock. The black liquid oozing out of the walls was becoming increasingly acidic, eating through the iron, the lead, and even the telekill. Soon enough, the cell itself would cease to have any structural integrity. If left unattended, the possessive mask would have telepathic free reign over the entire facility. In the absence of some way to reinforce the walls, they would have to be replaced entirely every 2 months. Once again, researchers suggested reinstating the host privileges for 035, a motion that Site Command once again denied. A disturbing pattern was becoming clear. Perhaps the researchers affected didn't even know it, but the mask was using them as a mouthpiece. They were all just pawns in a game of incentives, the mask bargaining and threatening until it got its way, and the Site Commanders refused to give in to its little game. SCP-035 would not reward their bravery. Soon enough, the entire cell was saturated in the dark liquid from floor to ceiling. Personnel needed to enter the room decked out in full reinforced hazmat suits if they wanted to survive even a small excursion. It had terraformed the cell into its own little slice of perdition, a horrifying concentration of dark power where the sadistic whims of the possessive mask reigned supreme, and its methods were about to get even more dangerous and extreme. Incidents with 035 became an almost daily occurrence as it exercised its power over the cell. There were incidents where it telekinetically locked the door, trapping researchers or cleaning personnel inside to be its psychic playthings. Appendages started forming out of the corrosive fluid puddles, reaching out and trying to claim the people trapped in the room. At this point, electronic devices stopped working inside the room, including light sources, meaning that the only way to navigate the darkened room was by gas lamp or candlelight. Any attempts to clean the excretions have become completely fruitless as the room degrades further and further, leaving the Site Commanders to ponder their next moves. In all likelihood, they would need to remove 035 from its current cell and transport it elsewhere. And who knows what nasty little tricks it would have up its sleeve for then. The mysteries and cruelties of the possessive mask aren't likely to stop fascinating and frightening the SCP Foundation and the rest of us anytime soon. Behind the alternating grin and frown of its porcelain face, it's concocting plans that you or I could scarcely even comprehend. It is old, it is patient, and above all, it is monstrous. And the effect it has on everyone around it is a frightening reminder that the power dynamics here might not be in favor of the Foundation this time. In other words, it's not trapped in here with us. We're trapped in here with it. When the drifter pulled up to the diner, almost everyone inside was already dead. Of course, he didn't know that yet, did he? It was a cold, late October night. The trees that he'd been passing for hours on those dark American back roads, the ones that still had the decency to be clothed anyway, were all wearing shades of orange and brown. Those same leaves plastered the wet macadam beneath him in their thousands as the front wheel of his hog tore through. He only realized how hungry he was when he actually saw the diner, and it was a real, authentic diner, one of the big metal tubes from the 50s picked up and dropped across these United States. Not a glorified cafe just putting on airs for that much-coveted diner vibe. A glinting steel pod with candy-striped canopy awning and a sign outside that said, Rico's. Behind it, a dark thicket of trees that gave way to miles of savage woodland. He could feel the grit of sleep underneath his eyelids, a certain heaviness in his muscles that only came from hours of driving. The vibration of the handles transmitting the engine's rumble via his hands, up through his forearms, and down his neural highways and byways to the rest of him. Steak, fries, and eggs, with a big mug of black coffee. That's exactly what he needs to make the rest of this journey. He's got a kilo of brown powder from some friends south of the border nestled away in his backpack. That's the kind of cargo you don't want to carry with your mind half sharp. When he stopped in the parking lot, nudging his kickstand into place and stuffing the keys into the pocket of his leather motorcycle jacket, he noticed that several cars were parked outside the diner. But from where he was standing, it didn't look like there was anyone inside. Weird. Still, the lights were on. The glowing LED sign said, "Open." It was worth a try. He trudged up the stairs and let himself in, the bell tinkling above his head. Oldies played on an authentic jukebox in the back of the building. Felt like walking into a Norman Rockwell painting. But where was everybody? The drifter's nose wrinkled. A smell, funny but familiar. Sickly sweet in a way that seemed to cling to the soft tissues in the back of your throat. Rot. Death. That's when he looked down and noticed the red smears on the black and white check tiles on the floor. Footprints and drag marks. The drifter had run with some tough crews in his time, dangerous fellows who'd cave in your face with a leather-gloved fist for looking at them the wrong way. But you didn't have to have been round the block to know something was terribly wrong here. Footsteps, the treads of dress shoes squeaking against the linoleum. The drifter turned and saw someone standing on the other end of the diner. From the way he was standing, he looked drunk, but he knew they wouldn't sell booze at a place you could only reach by car or bike. A man in a pin-check shirt and a denim jacket, standing like someone who'd only just been given his legs today and was still getting the hang of using them, his skin gray, eyes staring. Neither of them said a word, trying to get the measure of the other. The drifter, never taking his eyes off the man staring at him from the other end of the diner, started reaching into his jacket, reaching for the grip of his holstered Kimber K6, a revolver packing 6 .357 Magnum cartridges that could all run a lot faster than the creep giving him the evil eye. But that didn't matter. What matters was whether he could draw faster than that guy could reach him, and you'd be shocked, truly shocked, at how fast a motivated individual could cross 15 feet. Rarely in enough time for anyone but the Sundance Kid to clear leather, draw a bead on the target, and fire. While the drifter mulled the variables, the stranger let out a piercing shriek and made a mad dash across the length of the diner, hands outstretched like Frankenstein's monster. The drifter had managed to get his hands on the Kimber and pull it most of the way out of the holster next to his ribs when the stranger collided with him, knocking both of them to the ground. Cold hands wrapped around the drifter's throat as the Kimber was knocked from his hands, skidding across the well-polished tiles and underneath the nearby bar stools next to the counter. He could reach for it, but the iron grip of the stranger might have squeezed the life out of him by then. With one hand, he pushed back the stranger's face, which by now had contorted into an almost rabid snarl. With his free hand, the drifter reached down to his belt, where he kept a modern-style Bowie knife holstered. A much better weapon for more intimate encounters like this. But all those thoughts left his head when he noticed the tendrils. These thin, pinkish worms that seemed to come from everywhere, out of the folds in the stranger's jacket and shirt, round from the back of his neck, out of his skin, all surging forward, wriggling, reaching for the drifter. This wasn't another acid flashback. These monsters were real, and they wanted him, inching closer to his prone body. That's when he saw the shape rising up from behind the stranger, the monkey on his back, so to speak. A long, meaty cord that all those wormy strands seemed to split from. And atop that cord, what looked like a human brain, with 2 glaring blue eyeballs on stalks, staring at him. Even with no face around the eyes to give them any kind of human context, he knew that look. Knew it from junkies and skag fiends and meth monkeys. Those eyes were hungry, dope sick. They'd do anything for another hit. And as the tendrils reached for him, the drifter realized that he was the hit. A deafening bang shook the diner, reorienting the drifter's world. The brain on the stalk popped, spraying black slime over everything in the vicinity, the drifter included. All the tendrils went limp, and the stranger fell to the ground, dead. That brain thing, it must have been working him like a puppet.
The drifter scrambled for his revolver and popped back up above counter level, finding his feet again, waving the gun around like a madman. That was when he saw the waitress behind the counter in her retro pink uniform, complete with a little white hat. Dark skin and big, terrified doe eyes. She was holding a Remington 870 pump-action shotgun, the hardware trembling in her hands, plumes of smoke still rising from the barrel. A weapon that the drifter figured they probably kept under the counter to ward off robbers, always a risk when you run a diner out in the middle of nowhere, not for popping soul-sucking brain monsters. But the drifter had never made habit of looking a gift shotgun down the muzzle.
Thanks for the save,
he said, lowering his kimber and trying not to get any of that awful black sludge into his mouth.
Mind telling me what the hell's going on here, ma'am?
Everyone's dead,
was all the waitress could say, her voice sounding like shell shock itself made manifest.
They got in and killed everyone.
That much was already evident, and somehow that didn't fill him with all the dread that came when the waitress looked out the diner window and muttered a simple, quiet, "Oh no," because his mind repeated those exact words when he looked out and saw what she did. At least 10 figures were stumbling through the parking lot, former patrons, he guessed, all with that same stumbling zombie gait of the man who was just strangling him. And despite their differences, they all had one commonality in their silhouette, the dark shape of a disembodied brain rising up behind each of them, puppeting them with its fleshy tendrils. He could see 2 of them, real big boys, probably long-haul truckers once, standing on either side of his bike. And they were all making their way back towards the diner, probably to investigate whether the bang they'd just heard portended to more victims. And the drifter didn't like the thought of what would happen when they realized their assumption was right.
They're backdooring this place?
He asked. The waitress, who still hadn't lowered her Remington, nodded.
And then grab whatever spare shells you've got for that thing and let's make our exit. We don't want to be part of the dinner rush, lady.
He didn't need to tell her twice. She grabbed a small cardboard box and emptied the lipstick red shotgun shells out of it and into the pocket in the front of her waitress apron. And then they were off, barging through the back door and into the cold night air among the trees. Was the unknown territory of the forest their best option? Maybe, maybe not. The drifter just knew there was no way he was getting back to his bike, and on the road, they'd be sitting ducks. They didn't get the lead time that the drifter had hoped for. Soon, he could see shapes emerging around the back of the diner, the same lumbering figures with the hungry brains that had been sprawled out across the parking lot. It was like an infection, spreading from person to person, adding more to the horde of addicts who do anything to keep the buzz going just a little longer. The waitress screamed, and the drifter faced frontways to see a huge, burly trucker type in a red plaid shirt rise out of the dirt. He had a squirrel clutched in his mouth, tiny tendrils coming out of his nose, sticking straight into the squirrel's brain, feeding on something inside. The brain rose up behind the trucker, staring down with piercing green eyes. He gave a wide swing with an uncoordinated zombie fist, forcing the waitress to duck out of the way. She pumped the Remington and lined up another shot, but the trucker grabbed it by the barrel and turned it away as she fired, the report echoing off into the night. The drifter could see the heat of the barrel cooking the flesh of the trucker's palm, but that big ol' SOB didn't seem to notice. As he reached with his other hand towards the waitress's face, the drifter sprung into action, pulling out his kimber and firing 3 shots at center mass, an instinct from his cop days. But while he could see the impact of the bullets on the trucker's body, no pain was registered, not even a shrug of acknowledgement. He just kept reaching for the waitress with single-minded determination. And that's when the drifter remembered this guy's single mind wasn't inside his head anymore. It was floating up behind his back, staring with those evil eyes, eyes without a goddamn face, just as Holland Oates had sung it. He lined up the floating brain in his iron sights and squeezed off a shot, sending a white-hot round straight through that sinful cerebellum, like hitting an off switch. The brain let out a spurt of black goo and flopped uselessly onto the trucker's back as the puppet body collapsed into the dirt.
Ex-customer of yours?
The drifter said. The waitress nodded.
Sorry.
Don't be,
she said.
He was a lousy tipper.
But there was no more time for banter. While they dealt with the trucker, the others from the parking lot had caught up, only a few feet behind now. The drifter and the waitress were pushed further into the dark of the forest, away from the light of the diner. The world around them seemed to get dimmer and dimmer as they ran between the trees, the heavy footsteps of the horde hot on their heels. It seemed like there was no way out, that they'd be doomed to die or be taken, which was tantamount to death anyway, out there in the dark of the woods, firing panicked shots off into the night.
Wait!
The waitress said, pointing.
Over there!
The drifter saw that she was pointing at an iron door, slightly ajar, in what looked like a makeshift concrete bunker. It wasn't much, but it'd do. The duo ran over and hid inside, closing the door behind them and locking them in total darkness. The waitress felt along the wall, hoping against hope for a light switch to appear beneath her touch, and the universe smiled upon her. With a click, an old filament bulb overhead coughed itself into life. The room was small, but there was a stone stairway leading deeper into the building, and with the brain freaks outside, pounding their fists to hamburger on the door and trying to twist it open, going down seemed like the only logical move. The drifter ejected the cylinder on his Kimber, removed the spent cartridges, and slotted a few more live rounds from his pockets into place. The waitress followed suit, putting extra shells into the Remington's loading port. She gave the shotgun a cautious pump, and they descended down below.
You have any idea what this place is? I assume you're local.
The drifter asked. She shook her head.
This is the furthest I've been into these woods.
At the bottom of what seemed like an endless flight of stairs, they found what seemed to be a makeshift laboratory. Old-fashioned Cold War-era computer terminals, boxes of files, and most prominently, a series of huge tubes filled with viscous liquid. The ones that weren't broken and spilling that same liquid out onto the ground anyway. In the ones that were still intact, there was a familiar sight. Human brains with fully formed central nervous systems underneath them, complete with eyes on stalks. They sent a chill down both the drifter and the waitress's spines. So these were those things outside, the things that had taken those people, hollowed them, possessed them, claimed them.
Who would make something like this?
The waitress said.
Made or captured?
Replied the drifter. Neither could decide which possibility was more disturbing. Then they heard movement behind the boxes of files. Both turned, pointing their weapons into the murk, ready to unleash both barrels of hell on whatever dared to crawl out for them. But the scientist who popped up seemed human.
You shouldn't be here,
he said.
You'll let them out.
Well, clearly they're already out,
said the drifter, refusing to lower his weapon.
They got into the diner and killed my customers,
the waitress added. They didn't think it was possible for the doctor to get any paler, but somehow it happened. His clammy skin oozed flop sweat.
We need to call for backup, he mumbled. If they get to a population center, they'll...
He was cut off mid-sentence by pink tendrils wrapping around him from behind. He didn't even have time to scream before they slithered into his skin, rolling his eyes back up into his head as a staring brain rose up behind him. It was that quick, just a matter of seconds, and the man was gone. But as the drifter and the waitress prepared to shoot, the scientist leaned over, suddenly consumed by a wet, hacking cough that made his whole body convulse. His jaw stretched open, and something wet and pink forced its way out. A second brain, complete with staring eyes and the wet nervous system trailing behind it like a comet's tail, hit the floor with a nauseating slap. Before either the drifter or the waitress could overcome their confusion and disgust enough to shoot, the unnatural creature lunged for them. This is an anomaly you've likely never heard of, being one of the more obscure in the Foundation's early catalog. But make no mistake, if you underestimate your opponent, your last thoughts might just make a satisfying meal for SCP-1027, also known as the Carnivorous Central Nervous System. It's all there in the name. This is a human central nervous system that displays both predatory and parasitic behaviors to sentient life. While it bears a striking resemblance to an undeniably 1950s conception of alien life, this being is very much genetically human, and that makes its aggressive behavior to other members of its ostensible species even more perplexing. The thing about this rather nasty anomaly that seems most immediately apparent is that it can survive outside the human body. Believe me when I say, if you encountered one of the several anomalies capable of cleanly ripping out your entire brain and central nervous system, you would not survive the process for more than a few intensely painful seconds. The samples in Foundation custody, measured from the apex of the cerebrum to the base of the sciatic nerve, range from 1.1 meters to 1.5 meters. They possess most of the foundational human senses, including eyes, tactile nerves, cochlea, and perhaps even a rudimentary sense of smell. All neural systems of SCP-1027 are capable of locomotion, though in layman's terms, that means every part of this frightening creature can move. While its mollusk-like physical structure affords it the most effortless movement in a saline-like liquid solution, it's more than capable of moving and even giving chase on dry land. The myelin sheathing covering the cells of SCP-1027 is approximately 300% the thickness of that found in a healthy adult human, lending them freakish durability compared to their human counterparts. And that durability is a concern for the rest of us, because the chief diet of SCP-1027 seems to be human brain matter. More specifically, they feed on our neurotransmitters, all the delicate hormones that ferry thoughts and feelings across the canals of our minds, and all their methods of obtaining these are invariably fatal. Though in a turn of events both scientifically interesting and existentially frightening, the creatures have been shown to be able to survive for extended periods without feeding. We don't yet know whether these entities biologically need to feed, so to speak, or if they just like the feelings that consuming our neurotransmitters give us. Either way, for the samples in captivity, the Foundation has discovered that they become more docile with frequent feedings. When presented with live prey, the SCP-1027 samples will show a burst of frightening speed as they lunge at the target, attacking and bonding with their central nervous system. They will effectively hijack the body of their victim, taking control in order to feed off of those delicious neurotransmitters. And you don't even need to be alive for this to work. They've been known to enter the brains of the recently deceased via the ear canals. Upon breaching the meningeal membranes, the neural ganglia of SCP-1027 will release a high dose of an apparently modified dopamine compound directly into the brain, in addition to an electrical impulse measured at approximately 150 millivolts. Around 90% of the time, this will effectively wake up the corpse, which remains alive as a puppet under the control of SCP-1027 until the supply of neurotransmitters runs low. In this time, the body will show the intelligence and instinct of a low-level primate and will likely be used to hunt down new meal prospects, while 1027 has the benefit of legs on its side. Because of the sentient and predatory nature of this entity, it's been awarded the Euclid class, given to anomalies that pose a risk of autonomous containment breach. As part of its containment procedures, SCP-1027 is to be housed in a standard liquid containment tank, immersed in a saline solution. Personnel are to avoid direct physical contact with SCP-1027 with the exception of feeding staff. SCP-1027 is to be given one fresh bovine brain per week. All staff involved in feeding of SCP-1027 are to wear Level 4 bioprotective equipment. In the event of exposure to SCP-1027, affected personnel are to be immediately treated as instances of SCP-1027 and subjected to standard containment protocols. As a closing thought, I'd just like to say, be cautious when you're out there in the world. You never know when something hungry for your thoughts is lurking around the corner, slithering its tendrils towards you. After all, a mind is a terrible thing to taste.
You're about to see something you shouldn't. The thought is already locked and loaded in your mind when the static wakes you from your uneasy slumber. You're not in bed. It takes you a second to realize what's going on here. You're in the living room, sprawled out across the sofa with empty Mountain Dew bottles and pizza boxes left out on the coffee table. Your TV, which you must have fallen asleep watching, is on and tuned to a dead channel, glowing with the fuzzy blizzard of electronic noise and the ominous low hiss it brings with it. You check your phone as your eyes adjust to the near dark. It's well past midnight. You know you don't have work or school tomorrow, but as you stare into the hypnotic buzz of the screen, you can't shake the feeling that something is terribly wrong. Something cold touches you, and your neck jerks in its direction. The living room window is wide open, the night breeze blowing the curtains inward. Just as you're pondering the unsettling question of whether you opened it, the sound coming out of the TV changes. It's not the familiar static hum anymore. It's a terrible, shrill whine, the kind of racket that'd make nails on a chalkboard sound like Mozart. You cringe. Your jaw tenses up involuntarily. You fumble through the trash on the coffee table for the remote, just so you can turn the TV off before your head explodes. But the second you manage to zero in and reach for it, the sound and the static stop, leaving you in near total darkness. But the screen hasn't switched off. It's just a black screen, that surreal glowing shade of black only possible on an LED, where everything is just a little removed from reality. You're fixated on the screen as a vague shape comes into view out of the dark, an old wooden rocking chair on a dark floor. Still at first, but then it begins rocking back and forth,
overlaid with the kind of jittering scan line seen on an old VHS recording. That gets your back up a little. The myriad screamers of the 2000s internet have trained you to expect something dangerous when the screen seems all too eager to guide your attention. You know that it wants you to look at the chair, so instead, your eyes search the darkness around the chair, trying to pick out what might be alien shapes shifting in the murk. But instead, you notice something even stranger. When the chair is moving, you notice small bubbles rising up from it. All this, it's underwater. That explains that strange, almost abstracted look that everything has. And just as you seem to be getting a handle on things, you see a shape emerging out of the dark. Not far from the rocking chair, it's slowly getting closer and closer, moving with the weightless non-logic of a nightmare. It's a vaguely human shape, but something is wrong. It's a woman, you think, unclothed but rendered modest by the gloom of the dark waters. Her tangled locks float up and around her, framing her head like a halo. Her skin seems slate gray. There's something jumbled and wrong about her features. Slowly but surely, she's moving directly towards the screen, towards you. Even though you know logically that something on the other side of reality's great divide can't hurt you, you feel bone-deep anxiety anyway. You can see the woman's teeth now, jagged like broken glass, and arranged in 3 rows edging back into her mouth like auditorium seating. That's when you put it together. What she is, what she really is. She's like a shark woman. There are 3 deep, pulsing ridges in either of her cheeks, red around the edges. Gills. Her eyes are little black discs, set deep into the thick, gray flesh of her face. Just when you feel almost like you're getting used to her, she comes flying at the screen with frantic, ravenous speed. She grabs either side of the camera like she's snatching your head up by the ears. She gives a terrible animal shriek and bites down, your field of vision disappearing into the blackness of her fang-lined maw. Your whole body freezes for a moment, the room dark again, until somehow, something even worse appears on screen. It's a live video feed of your open window, filmed from the outside, as though standing in your yard. Text flashes up on screen saying, "Leaving your window open at night leads to bad dreams." You get up from your seat to get a closer look. This isn't real. Can't be real. It's gotta just be some other window. And in your paranoid, half-awake state, you're just confusing it for your own. But as you approach the screen, you see a shape pass across the window laterally. It's you. You can feel your heart jump into your throat. You pivot on your heels and rush towards the window. There must be someone standing on your lawn outside, filming and streaming to your TV. You need to close the window before they get in. Who knows what kind of maniac you... But when you reach the window, there's nobody out there. Just your empty lawn and a dark street. Is your mind playing tricks on you? You don't even care anymore. You slam the window shut and draw the curtains just as fast. When you turn around, you can hear the warm, fuzzy hum again. Your TV screen is bathed in static. You know what you saw, even if you're not entirely sure of your sanity now. But there's not a soul out there who'd believe you. Except, of course, the SCP Foundation. That's because when Foundation researchers hear accounts like this, they don't assume that a person has fallen asleep while watching Adult Swim after a little too much Mountain Dew and wacky tobacco. They know the truth. It's all connected to SCP-7719, also known by its codename, the Harrison Gray Conspiracy. In its purest sense, SCP-7719 is an umbrella classification for a series of bizarre and disturbing anomalous broadcasts that have occurred across North American television since as early as 1998. The broadcasts take the form of signal hijacks that intrude upon regular programming, often beginning with a period of television static accompanied by a loud and off-putting noise. These incidents only ever occur when there are viewers present. There have been no documented cases of these signal interruptions occurring on broadcasts that weren't being actively witnessed by audiences at home. We'll get into some of the specific disturbing case studies in just a moment, as well as discussing how it may be tied into a seemingly harmless online internet trend. But first, it's vital for you to understand the 2 common anomalous factors that act as the through line between all 7719 instances. First, the primary anomalous effect. It has thus far proven impossible to directly record the SCP-7719 broadcasts through any means. So far, the Foundation has tried with VHS tapes, cameras, digital recording software, and several other methods that aren't available to regular civilians. All of them have failed. Even single photographs or screen grabs of recordings inevitably lead to them just being frames from the non-anomalous programming that was supposed to be airing during the intrusion. In a way, this has been kind of a double-edged sword for the SCP Foundation. On one hand, it has been a roadblock to research that the Foundation has mainly needed to rely on second-hand reports in order to study this phenomena. Given the overall fallibility of human memory, it's led to serious holes in the credibility of Foundation data gathering on this subject. Well, until more recent events anyway. More on that later. However, the inability for civilians to create records of SCP-7719 has also been a real boon for the Foundation's containment efforts. It has prevented unauthorized distribution of this potentially sensitive material out of pure hearsay that is often heard and then just as quickly disregarded. Why would someone disregard an account of someone witnessing an SCP-7719 broadcast? Well, that's because of the strangeness of the content. Every single one of these broadcasts, though varied in setup, all feature humanoid, though crucially not human, creatures in various contexts. What exactly do I mean by that? Well, let's take a look at a few case studies. 38-year-old Michael Lean had his experience back in October of 2014, creating the plausible deniability that what he was witnessing was perhaps some esoteric Halloween prank rather than an anomalous reality. But he can still distinctly recall a frightening signal intrusion that struck during the middle of the night. In his own words, "My TV was showing a long, dark hallway. The only light was ambient, the camera struggling to pull in any light whatsoever to show the scene. At the end of the hallway, about 30 feet away, was an open doorway, completely pitch black past the threshold. I couldn't help but watch, the screen crackling and warping gently, reminding me of the VHS tapes we used to watch as kids. After a while, there was a soft, snuffling noise, and then something dashed across the doorway quickly, as though it didn't want to be seen." When questioned further, all he could recall was that the being he saw had antlers. 27-year-old Irene Cordova walked in on a strange SCP-7719 signal intrusion being witnessed by her young son back in 2007. Naturally, the Foundation interviewed her about her experience and discovered certain motifs consistent with prior reports. "It was a bit upsetting, actually. It was the last few seconds, but what I was seeing was what looked like a newsroom with a man in a suit nervously signing off the segment. Except it wasn't really a man. Not a human one at first. I can list it for you. Head of a golden retriever, eyes of a snake, antelope antlers. Past the neck, the fur gave way to these slimy scales? I can't tell if they're more fishy or if they're more lizardy. Its hands were sharp and ended in talons, those of a hawk's." This was followed by scattered textual messages on screen telling them to stay alert. Back in 2010, 35-year-old Leland Rhodes, a Foundation agent, was privy to one of the broadcasts. When his attempts to record it failed, he instead took fastidious shorthand notes of what appeared to be a bizarro sitcom. Mother has octopoid head. One child resembles cross between Komodo dragon and domestic chicken. Other resembles badger with praying mantis mandibles. In 2003, 70-year-old Myrtle Schaefer shared a disturbing SCP-7719 experience while watching a cryptid hunting show on the History Channel, a memory she contextualizes as a nightmare that seems to have too much in common with other SCP-7719 accounts to be pure coincidence. Despite her own assertions that the incident wasn't real, Myrtle seemed to be in considerable distress when recounting it. "Handheld camera, shaky movements, people breathing heavily. There was this moment. They were watching a patch of the forest with night vision on, except instead of green, it all burned red. The rig gently rose and fell with the cameraman's breathing. It was calm. There was just breathing and the crickets. Then a twig snapped behind everyone. The camera whirls around and you see it. Something standing behind them. Large eyes that popped out of its head, skin like a bloated corpse, gills and clawed fingers, vestigial arms that were barely long enough to function. It reaches out towards the cameraman and takes a few steps forward. Sirens. 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 Like the tornado warning that I heard throughout my childhood. Like the storm was bearing down on me at that very minute. Its eyes are swiveling loose and lazy in its head. So help me God, they can see me.
They can see me. They can see me.
Witness reports provided exact timings and transmission channels, allowing Foundation researcher Karolina Wojciechowski to trace the anomalous broadcasts to a definitive source, a small, independent television studio called LMGC, situated in Pelham, Pennsylvania. Several members of Foundation personnel, backed up by a contingent of armed Mobile Task Force operatives, attempted to investigate the studio back in 2005, only to find that it had been abandoned. While the studio was, technically speaking, in working order, everything was covered in a thick layer of dust, and there was no sign of not only human habitation, or any vermin taking up residence within the building. Records found in the building's filing system show that it was at one point active in earnest, but those files don't extend beyond 2003. Something made all of these people up sticks and leave, and quickly too. Of particular note was one mysterious file that the researchers recovered at the abandoned station, which read as follows: specifically regarding the suppression and censorship of the following in all programming aired by LMGC: profanity, also pertaining to the Lord's name, nudity, sexual perversion, intimacy and affection between illegitimate couples, criticism/ridicule of the clergy, criticism/ridicule of the government and the Constitution, imagery pertaining to Richard G. Harrison's guideline set, parenthetical, partially summarized below, panicked tones and demeanors, unprompted emergency announcements, also pertaining to non-standard emergency alerts, cross-signal interference, extravagant biologies. All procedures and techniques for media management are to be submitted to Mr. Hampton for finalization and production. If unclear when disclosing and distributing information to the proper channels and persons, please refer to Gray Guide Chapters 3 through 7 regarding identification tactics and undetectable discernment techniques. This note is why SCP-7719 is referred to as the Harrison-Gray Conspiracy. There are frequent references to both the Gray Guide and a man named Richard Harrison across many pieces of documentation found in the LMGC facility. The greater significance of these names is still under further investigation, but as it stands, we don't have any conclusive answers. Some believe that the emergence of SCP-7719 is tied into a popular online phenomenon that's infected the human psychosphere: analog horror. If you're a fan of this channel and thus likely enjoy stories of a morbid and frightening nature, there's a good chance that you're familiar with the existence of analog horror already. However, if everything I'm discussing right now sounds just as arcane as an anomaly with level 4 clearance, don't worry, I'll briefly explain so we can all be on the same page. Analog horror is seen by many as a kind of evolution of the late 2000s and early to mid-2010s horror trends of creepypasta and alternate reality games, or ARGs. These multimedia horror experiences, spanning everything from stories to web pages to online video series, sparked the imaginations of millions of horror fans online. For many, they proved more effective than traditional horror, books, films, television, or games, because they blurred the line between fiction and reality. It was horror that you could interact with and become part of the narrative, all while maintaining a sense that what you were watching might truly be real, as anything on the internet could be. In a number of ways, analog horror is the next logical step. It reconciles the look and feel of the era of video, of terrestrial television, of local news, public access, and forgotten archives. It creates uniquely digital horror narratives that warp and twist these nostalgic aesthetics into frightening new configurations. In series like The Mandela Catalog, a biblical nightmare is unleashed upon humanity in the form of alternates, demonic doppelgangers that can drive people to dangerous and self-destructive behavior. In Gemini Home Entertainment, a series of innocuous tapes reveal an alien invasion supplanting humanity on a cosmic level, unleashing monsters that want to control and feed on us. And in the foundational short YouTube series No Through Road, a group of British teenagers are trapped on a nightmarish looping road they're unable to escape, all while a sinister masked killer stalks them. All of these ideas take the cozy, familiar aesthetics of VHS and early digital home videos and imbue them with a little twinge of unsettling darkness. Given that anomalies are often related to the ambient coronas of psychic energy that humans collectively exude, it's possible that SCP-7719 is connected to the rise in analog horror on the internet. Perhaps more and more people are seeing these cursed broadcasts, or remembering that they saw them in their youth, and unable to record any of them firsthand due to the broadcast's primary anomalous effect, they may have subconsciously sought to reproduce the emotional reality of their experience in works of analog horror. In truth, without the Foundation issuing funds for further research and an extensive interview campaign, there's no way we can really know. However, the Foundation is, thankfully, endlessly adaptable. When life hands them anomalemons, they make anomalemonade, and the proliferation of analog horror content across the internet has actually helped inform the containment procedures for this particular anomaly, which, by the way, has been given the designation Euclid due to its unpredictable nature, making it difficult to preemptively contain. Disinformation Campaign 7719 is the Foundation's main defense against this anomaly's threat to consensus reality. It dictates that the Foundation will try to convince any populations exposed to the broadcasts that what they had seen was actually a mass media alternate reality game or analog horror experience. Most people will likely accept this excuse just so they don't have to consider the darker implications of the alternative. For those who still want to cling on to the frightening reality, the Foundation can resort to its more traditional methods, targeted use of Class C amnestic treatment. As of April 7, 2006, all data and research regarding SCP-7719 has been relegated to Site-57 for analysis. All television broadcasts originating from and received by North America are to be consistently monitored by a combination of Foundation AI constructs and appointed surveyors. These positions are tasked with analyzing online reports of SCP-7719, with AI constructs cataloging descriptions for researcher review and verification. The overall effects of this anomaly seem to add up to being a frightening but not truly dangerous experience. But I should inform you that there's been some worrying evidence that SCP-7719 might be far more than what it's been letting on. Truth be told, I withheld this detail until now out of a genuine sense of nervousness about what it could mean going forward. This is the story of the July 2nd incident. Back in 2015, on that very date, a broadcast believed to be from the same source as SCP-7719 intercepted every screen in Site-57. It coincided with an extremely disconcerting mass failure of the on-site alert protocol, making alarms go off all over the facility. It was such a singular and disturbing event that many of the staff members on site requested to be reassigned for reasons of serious distress, though all of these requests were denied. But most concerningly of all of the intercepted screens began playing different messages. When strung together, they presented a semi-coherent but undeniably disquieting meaning. These were the messages. Please do not continue. Interference, it is pain. Don't look at us. Turn it off, turn it off. Why are you doing this? Help us. Leave us be. Please, 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 please. Check out the DrBob Patreon and become a junior researcher today. Now go and watch another entry from the files of DrBob, like SCP-5362, the one with 1,000 faces.